Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Leba, and I will be chairing the Board of Pharmacy meeting this morning. It is April 7th, 8:30 a.m. And again, welcome to the second day of the Arizona State Board of Pharmacy. With that, Dr. Gandhi, will you please establish a quorum?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Solari,
At your service.
Mr. Dang,
Present.
Mr. Minkus,
Here.
Mr. Leba,
Here.
Ms. Lahan,
Present.
Ms. Walmsley,
Here.
Mr. Tong,
Present.
and Ms. Nair.
Here, sorry.
All
Thank you.
accounted for, Mr. Chair.
Appreciate it. Board members, I know conflicts of interest were logged yesterday and recorded. Any additional from yesterday? I'll just go down the line. Mr. Dang?
I have the 25K, sir, and I did submit the recusal form to Ms. Canavan.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Walmsley, any additional?
Nothing further.
Mr. Solari?
None, sir.
Mr. Minkus? Mr. Minkus? No. Ms. Lahan?
None additional.
Mr. Tong?
None.
Ms. Nair?
Nothing additional.
Okay, thank you very much. I do believe I have everybody. Okay, today we will pick up at the tab 26, cases recommended for approval or state's motion to vacate hearing. This is the time for the board to consider consent agenda item 26A and 26B. Amy Estrada, board case number 21-0545, PHR. Rick A. Hanlon, board case number 21-0629, PHR. Does any respondent, attorney, or board member want to pull any case from the consent agenda for further consideration? Hearing none, I will move on. Will the state's attorneys please introduce themselves?
Seth Hargraves, Assistant Attorney General on behalf of the state.
Jean Galvin, Assistant Attorney General on behalf of the state.
Thank you. Are there any other parties present for these matters? The state has filed a motion to deem and vacate the hearing in each of these matters. If these motions are granted, the board will have adopted the factual allegations set forth in the complaints and findings of fact and the alleged violations as law as it conclusions of law, pardon me. Is there a motion regarding the state's motion to deem?
Mr. President, I move the board grant the state's motion to deem and vacate the hearings.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mr. Solari.
Second.
I have a second by Ms. Walmsley. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. We will now deliberate on the appropriate discipline to be imposed. And I'll open it up for board member discussion.
Mr. President, is 27C excluded until we get, because it also is the same as I think 27D. So the motion I make, will it include, if the motion I intend to make, would it include 26C or not?
It will not.
A and B.
Thank you. Then if nobody has any questions, I move to adopt the state's recommended discipline as set forth in its motion to deem and vacate the scheduled hearings.
Thank you, Mr. Solari.
I
I have a
second.
motion and a second by Ms. Lahan. Any discussion? I'll have a roll call, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Mr. Solari,
Aye.
Mr. Dang,
Aye.
Mr. Minkus,
Aye.
Mr. Leba,
Aye.
Ms. Lahan,
Aye.
Ms. Walmsley,
Aye.
Mr. Tong,
Aye.
Ms. Nair.
Aye.
Ayes have it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. This concludes these proceedings. The board's decision will be reduced to written orders and will be sent to each of the respondents. Thank you. 26C. Fusion IV Pharmaceuticals, Inc., doing business as Axia Pharmaceuticals. And I will hand over to board staff or counsel for an introduction?
Good morning, Jean Galvin, Assistant Attorney General on behalf of the state. Before I proceed any further, could board staff confirm for me that there are no representatives from Axia Pharmaceuticals on the call? I do not see anyone, but I want to be sure. Is there anyone from Axia Pharmaceuticals? I don't see anyone, Mr. Chairman, so I'm going to proceed. The matter before you concerns Fusion IV Pharmaceuticals doing business as Axia Pharmaceuticals. This is a California firm that was found to be shipping prescription medication into Arizona without a valid permit. The complaint and notice of hearing in this matter can be found on page 3635 of your materials. This complaint was mailed to respondent on March 3rd of 2022. The respondent has not filed an answer to the complaint and notice of hearing and has not been in contact with board staff. For that reason, I respectfully request that the board deem the allegations in the complaint and notice of hearing as admitted and as adopted as findings of fact and conclusions of law. And you can use that script that was just provided to you. And upon deeming the allegations as admitted, the state requests that the hearing set for today be vacated. After that takes place, I will then discuss proposed discipline. The state would request a motion to deem the allegations admitted and adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the complaint and notice of hearing and vacate the hearing. The complaint and notice of hearing appears on page 3635 of your materials.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. Board members, any discussion or motion?
Mr. President, having heard none, I move that the board grant the state's motion to deem, admit the material, and then vacate the hearing.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Galvin, any clarification needed?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion and I have a second by Ms. Snare. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Galvin.
Finally, with respect to the discipline that the state is seeking, I would ask that the board hear from Executive Director Gandhi. Recall that Axia is an unpermitted entity, so suspension or revocation is not up for consideration. And I would like Dr. Gandhi to discuss the imposition of a civil penalty. You may wish to refer to page 3655 of your documentation for Dr. Gandhi's discussion. Dr. Gandhi?
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. Let me just reference that page you also.
3655. For clarification, this is a list of prescription drugs that Axia provided to board staff upon request for the entire year of 2019. This, according to Axia, was emailed by the owner, and it is a full list of prescription drugs that were shipped into Arizona in 2019. The board had asked for the drugs also shipped into Arizona from 2020. That information was not received. So this relates only to their shipment of prescription drugs for 2019. And I believe Dr. Gandhi has used this to formulate his request for the imposition of a civil penalty.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. And yes, members of the board, this is what I used. And if you go to page 3685, towards the 2/3 towards the bottom of the page, it has a number 1,770 prescriptions in this report. So I basically use that number to justify a civil penalty of $177,000.
So the state's request is that the board would impose a discipline of $177,000 against respondent, and would ask that the board determine an appropriate time within which that civil penalty should be paid to the board.
And I just want to clarify, this penalty is against Axia, the company, not any of the individual officers or members of the company.
Correct. It goes to the entity, the permit holder. Your motion may also include a provision that if the civil penalty is not paid in full within the time period set by the board, that the staff would have the ability to refer the matter to the Attorney General's office for collection.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. Board members, any further questions, clarification, or I'll entertain a motion?
Mr. President, I'm willing to make the motion to grant the state and the board staff's request, penalize Axia Pharmaceuticals $177,000 to be payable probably not within our standard terms of 3 months, but let's give them 6 months. And then if not paid in full in 6 months, refer the matter to Attorney General's office for collection.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Solari. I have a motion and I have a second by Ms. Walmsley. Any other discussion, board members, before we go into a roll call? Dr. Gandhi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Solari,
Aye.
Mr. Dang,
Aye.
Mr. Minkus,
Aye.
Mr. Leba,
Aye.
Ms. Lehan,
Aye.
Ms. Walmsley,
Aye.
Mr. Tong. Mr. Tong,
Aye.
was that an aye, Mr. Tong?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Nair,
Aye.
ayes have it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to tab 27, I will pause a second and see if there's time needed to get the cases together or if we're ready to proceed.
Mr.
I'll
Chair, if
defer.
I may interject a little bit here, just going back to 26A and B. I know we took a vote on those matters. I believe Ms. Walmsley was recused from 26A. Can you confirm, Ms. Walmsley? You're on mute. Ms.
I'm
Walmsley.
sorry. Yes, I was recused from 26A.
So I just wanted on the record that Ms. Walmsley was recused from 26A. I know we took a vote and Ms. Walmsley did vote on that agenda item.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, Ms. Galvin, Mr. Hargraves, do you need any time before we enter into 27A?
Actually, for under tab 27, I think we're only dealing with 27A, B, and C at this point. Each of these matters were scheduled for hearing for today. After the notices of hearing went out, each party, either individually or through their counsel, approached either Ms. Galvin or myself. So for those 3 matters, you have signed consent agreements in your packet for your consideration in lieu of a hearing. In the case of Ms. Seablum, it's a consent agreement for probation and continuing education. For Mr. Dix, it's a consent for voluntary surrender. And for Cordant Pharmacy, it's a consent for a $250 civil penalty. The state would ask that the board accept those signed consent agreements to resolve the matters in lieu of hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, any other considerations on our part before I entertain a motion from board members?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, other than taking them individually, I do not.
Okay, thank you. 27A, board members, this is the case of Kelly D. Seablum, board case number 21-0116. You do have a signed consent in front of you. Any questions, or I'll entertain a motion?
Dr. Leba, I'd make a motion that we vacate the hearing and accept the proposed consent agreement as proposed.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Walmsley and a second by Mr. Minkus. I'll do a roll call.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Mr. Solari,
Aye.
Mr. Dang,
Aye.
Mr. Minkus, Mr. Leba,
Aye.
Ms. Lehan,
Aye.
Ms. Walmsley,
Aye.
Mr. Tong.
Aye.
Ms. Nair.
Aye.
Thank you. 27B, Chad Anthony Dix, board case number 21-0630-PHR. Board members, again, you have a signed consent in front of you. If there's any questions or clarifications needed, we can do that now. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we vacate the hearing and accept the proposed consent agreement as proposed.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Walmsley with a motion, Mr. Minkus with a second. Any other conversation, board members? Dr. Gandhi, roll call.
You, Mr. Solari,
Aye.
Mr. Dang,
Aye.
Mr. Minkus. Aye. Mr. Leba,
Aye.
Ms. Lahan,
Aye.
Ms. Walmsley,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
and Ms. Nair.
Aye.
Ayes have it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. 27C, Cordon Pharmacy Solutions, board case number 21-0435. Board members, you have assigned consent in front of you. Are there any questions, or I'll entertain a motion?
Mr. Chair, I believe Roger Morris was representing Cordon Pharmacy. I see that his name appearing. I don't know if he wants to address the board on this.
Sure. I'm here, and this is one where Cordon signed the consent a long time ago. You guys sent it to him. Apparently, there was some confusion about the check getting there. Apologies. The check has now been sent and everything is there. So they're fine with this.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Board members, any questions, or I'll entertain a motion?
Mr. President, I'm ready to make a motion.
Thank you.
And make a motion that we vacate the hearing and accept the proposed consent agreement as proposed.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Walmsley and a second by Ms. Nair. Dr. Gandhi?
Mr. Solari,
Aye.
Mr. Dang,
Aye.
Mr. Minkus. Aye. Mr. Leba,
Aye.
Ms. Lahan,
Aye.
Ms. Walmsley,
Aye.
Mr. Tom,
Aye.
and Ms. Nair.
Aye.
Ayes have it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So that takes us to Jennifer and Dr. Gandhi, special request, or would you like to move back to conferences?
We can move to conferences. We have some that have been agreed on, and two items being tabled. If we can address those, and
Okay, what agenda item should I pick up with?
let's do 25I if we can.
Thank you. 25I, this is Cobalt Rehabilitation Hospital. And I will ask for a synopsis from board staff or council.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Actually, we have a proposed consent agreement inside your board book for consideration. Cobalt and the board staff have worked on this discussion and feel that this was an agreeable civil penalty based on our discussion, and it's up for your consideration.
Thank you. Board members?
Mr. Leba, Roger Morris for Cobalt. I'm in agreement with Mr. Gandhi's statements.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Board
Yeah.
members, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I'll move to accept the consent agreement as signed.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Solari and second by Ms. Walmsley. Dr. Gandhi?
Mr. Solari,
Aye.
Mr. Dang,
Aye.
Mr. Minkus. Mr. Minkus,
Sorry. Aye.
Mr. Leba,
Aye.
Ms. Lahan,
Aye.
Ms. Walmsley,
Aye.
Mr. Tom,
Aye.
Ms. Nair.
Aye.
Thank you.
Ayes have it, Mr. Chair.
4J, Dr. Gandhi?
A similar story on this one, Mr. President. Mr. Morris and I had a discussion about this matter, and we came to an agreement on a consent agreement that is before you for consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Morris?
Same thing. We are in agreement with the consent that's been signed.
Thank you. Board members?
Make a motion to approve the consent.
Thank you, Ms. Nair.
Second.
For the second by Ms. Lahan. Dr. Gandhi?
Mr. Solari,
Aye.
Mr. Dang,
Aye.
Mr. Minkus,
Aye.
Mr. Leba,
Aye.
Ms. Lahan,
Aye.
Ms. Walmsley,
Aye.
Mr. Tom.
Aye.
Ms. Nair.
Aye.
Ayes have it, Mr. President.
Thank you. Moving on to 25K, 21-0540, MD 24 Pharmacy, Jenny Du, Tan Du, Lin Cao Win.
Mr.
And
Chairman,
if I-
I'm recused from this one. Just
Thank
so-
you, Dr. Dang. And then Ms. Richardson is the compliance officer that I'll ask for a summary once we have representatives identified for MD 24 pharmacy.
Mr. President, they may not be joining until around 10 o'clock. It hasn't been, it's open on our agenda for discussion anytime today, but I believe we noticed them for 10 o'clock. Can we address 25N and O real quick and
N and O?
N and O, yes.
Okay. 25N 21-0535.
And in conjunction with 25 and O is also tied to that case as well.
Okay.
So 21-0571. I respectfully request, and I believe Board Chair, you and I had a discussion about this, to table this discussion and for me to engage a discussion to agree on a consent agreement with the permit holder through their legal counsel.
Okay. Do you need a motion or can we just say table?
I think we can just table it, but I wanted to bring it before the board for transparency.
As long as there's no objection from any other board member, the chair can table it.
Board members, I will table unless I hear feedback from you. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, the other special requests and 25K L&M were asked to appear at 10 o'clock. If they're present, we can address them. If they're not, we will have to wait till 10 o'clock.
Okay. I will lean on you and board staff to let me know if anybody's present for those cases. If not, we will move to tab 26. I'm sorry, special request 29.
Let me just go through the attendance list here real quick, if I may. Mr. Chair, I do not see anybody for agenda item 25K, L, or M online at this time.
Thank you. We will come back to those at 10 o'clock. Tab 29, special request, discussion, consideration, and possible action. 29A.
I believe, Mr. Chair, the board had decided to table that agenda item.
That's right. Thank you. 29B. Dr. Gandhi, could you please give us a summary of the request before the board?
I'm looking for someone that is supposed to appear for them. Again, special requests were asked to be on at 10 o'clock. If they're present, we can certainly entertain a discussion. I think the only person I see on here is Mr. Morris. And we can take his request, which is 25C.
29C?
29C, I apologize.
That's okay. 29C, this is a special request regarding Walgreens 3789, board case number 21-0210, request for reconsideration. And if it's okay with the board members and staff, I would like to open up with Mr. Morris to make an opening statement.
Mr. Morris, are you prepared to discuss 29C, or do you have members from Walgreens still waiting to appear?
I'm prepared to discuss it. I do not see anyone from Walgreens on now.
Should we then maybe move to 29F possibly, or is that the same situation?
Both clients expected to be able to participate on those ones. So I thought they would be here at 10 o'clock.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chair. We didn't expect the hearings to go so effectively, efficiently. So appreciate Ms. Galvin and Seth for doing that. But at this time, the folks in the the conference and special requests were asked to appear after 10 o'clock. It doesn't seem like any one of them are present on the attendance list here.
Mr. President, if you'd like, I probably can get my clients available in the next 10, 15 minutes if you need to take a short break and then be available for 29C and 29F. at 9:15.
That's a great idea. Let's take Roger, 15 minutes, do you think is appropriate, or 20? What would you like?
Let's plan for 15. If it doesn't work, I'll let you know, but let's plan for 15.
Let's plan for a 15-minute recess, and then we will reconvene. Thank you.
have some questions and it might put a
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Dr. Gandhi, would you please establish a quorum?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Solari,
Aye.
Mr. Dang,
At your service.
Mr. Minkus,
Aye.
Mr. Leba,
Aye.
Ms. Lehan.
Here.
Ms. Walmsley,
Here.
Mr. Tong.
Here.
And Ms. Nair.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Looking back to 29C, Mr. Morris, were you able to get a hold of your clients, or do we need to wait a little bit longer?
No, I was able to get a hold of them, and I'm prepared to go forward with 29C and then 29F.
Okay. Mr.
Dr.
Morris,
Leba, I'm recused from the first item, so I'll go ahead and turn off.
thank you, Ms. Walmsley. Mr. Morris, would you like to make an opening statement?
Sure. 29C deals with a request for reconsideration for Walgreens Drug Store 3789. This is a store that had some controlled substance inventory issues several years ago. The board dealt with it. Last year in May, there was one bottle of Adderall that was lost or stolen. It appears to have been one technician who was involved with it. There's some video that the board dealt with looking at it that was inconclusive, but it appears that there was a technician involved. Because of the processes and issues that occurred several years ago, Walgreens enhanced the security in this store significantly. They added 6 additional cameras, a variety of different diversion techniques, counts daily and issues. And so this single bottle of Adderall that was stolen was identified within 24 hours of the theft or loss that occurred. Appropriate reports were made to the board, or appropriate reports were made to the DEA. The board did its own investigation. The board also had a separate complaint against the technician involved here. That technician is no longer practicing in the pharmacy field and allowed her license to lapse, although I do not see that the board disciplined the technician in any way. As soon as the theft was identified or loss was identified, all of the employees of the store were brought in and asked about it. Everyone denied any involvement with it. This particular technician at issue ceased to continue to work at Walgreens. She never showed up again thereafter. The board decided at its meeting when it first heard all of this, and there were a lot of other thoughts that went on with it, that because this was the second matter involving a stimulant, the Adderall product that was there, that the consent was that they offer a consent, and it was that the conduct and circumstances constitute a violation because they failed to maintain effective controls against diversion. In this particular case, they have enhanced controls in place. They followed up with it. They acted immediately on it. They identified the theft within 24 hours. The people involved with it are no longer there. And since then, this event occurred in May of 2021. There have been no other issues at that store. Based on all of those circumstances, we are requesting reconsideration for the board to not offer them $1,000 consent, but to be able to send them, to dismiss this or send them a non-disciplinary letter. They acted exactly as you're supposed to do in this scenario. They reacted timely and appropriately. There is no pharmacy in the country, and certainly in Arizona, that can prevent a theft if someone is simply going to take a bottle. This was identified immediately. There was some question about whether the technician should have been required to take a drug test. Walgreens policy requires after you begin employment, there's only two circumstances where drug tests are given. One on a completely randomized basis, and the second when the employee visibly demonstrates actions that require a drug test, meaning their physical actions indicate something is of a concern. No one did this. Wouldn't have mattered anyway, because this employee, as soon as she was interviewed by loss prevention, ceased coming to the pharmacy. We never saw her again thereafter. So under these circumstances, we'd ask you to accept the request for reconsideration and change the consent in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. A question for you. Was there ever a confession or a conclusion that this technician was indeed 100% proof that the theft occurred by the technician? Or are we assuming that they did because they didn't show up again after the interview?
The technician specifically denied it for loss prevention. The video shows the bottle in front of her, and then it shows the bottle gone. But I can't conclusively state to 100% certainty that that's what happened. And I think that's what this board concluded when you didn't discipline her and you simply allowed her license to lapse.
Thank you.
Mr. President, may I ask a question for the board staff? In preparation for this case, I was reading Mr. Morris's letter, and he compared this to, the third paragraph of his letter, compared this to a case number 210258 in December's meeting. So I went to the board meeting minutes or board book from December, and I couldn't find this 210258. Can board staff verify what is 210258, and does it pertain to this case?
Reviewing it now, Mr. Solari.
Morris, do you have the details of that while they're looking to confirm?
I don't have the specifics. What the point was with that example and the item is simply having a loss by itself does not mean that you don't have effective controls. Again, pharmacies employ humans. It is impossible to stop someone who's going to take something with it. The question is how quickly you can identify it, how you put controls in place to be able to stop people from doing it and working through that. And the board in the prior case recognized that simply the loss by itself is not evidence, conclusive evidence of lack of effective controls.
Thank you. Mr. Haber, if you're on the line, one of my concerns was, and you look at every case for the contents of what's before you and that in that presence, but as far as looking at total safety, in the last 2 years, there was a period of the same type of loss, the same type of medications, and that did weigh on my decision-making in this case. Can you please comment on that and the past, what it was and how recent?
Mr. President, I'd be happy to do that. There was a prior loss reported as was stated by counsel. It was a 106 that the board received. It was dated February 13th of 2020. It was received on February 19th of 2020, and it involved 5 diverted or lost. It involved 5 different controlled substance losses: Oxy 5, 103, Deamphetamine 1091, Deamphetamine 15202, Deamphetamine 20236, and on that 106, Deamphetamine 30203, later to be revised on a follow-on 106, which was received on 219. That quantity was up to number 230.
And that was in the last 2 years of the last reported incident?
That was the prior event in February of 20. Then this case that council is requesting a reconsideration on, that loss was reported to us a year later on April 3rd of 21.
I know this might be hard, and I'm sorry for doing this to you, but how many losses of amphetamine combo products do we have from this permit within the last 2 years? What's the total number?
Approximately 900 dosage forms.
Thank you.
I take that back, Mr. President.
Yes.
800. There was a 900 includes the opiate.
Okay, thank you.
President Leba, all of those except for this last 100 were in the earlier matter that the board has dealt with and is not the subject of the request for reconsideration. The only matter on this one is the single bottle of the Adderall that occurred in April, May of 2021.
I do appreciate that comment, Mr. Morris. It does play into the decision of determining if the permit holder and staff did appropriately react, in my opinion. Again, that's my opinion. I'll open it up to board members for discussion.
Mr. President, to address Mr. Solari's question, that case number referenced in the request letter is against an individual and not Walgreens.
Okay, thank you. Board members, questions?
Mr. President, I want to do the right thing. I want to be able to go back and look at the minutes or the video of this and kind of get my thoughts together again. I understand the case 210210, what Mr. Morris has requested, but I wanted to compare it since he compared it in his letter to this 210258. I want to identify the right case and be able to review the minutes from that as well, or the video from that as well, just so we can have, understand what he's talking about when he says what happened in this case is similar to what happened in that case. Perhaps we should table this item till the next meeting, continue it to the next meeting. And then that way, maybe board staff can get us videos of the discussion for both of these cases when the correct case number is identified, and we can proceed from there.
Mr. Solari, this is Jennifer. Are you referring to case number 20-0258?
Is that the correct case number instead of the 210258? I was looking at 210258 and I couldn't find anything that pertains to this issue.
I think it is 20 rather than 21. That's my mistake.
Okay, so that case, there were similar concerns in that case.
Okay, is it possible to continue this till the next meeting so we have a chance to review our notes and maybe the video and that kind of stuff, so I can have a better idea of what we're dealing with here?
Solari, that would be up to board chair and board members.
Let me make a motion to that effect and see what happens. I make a motion to continue this case to the next meeting, give us a chance to review case 20-0258 and see how its facts pertain to 210210. In the meantime, if the board staff could find the video of the minutes or whatever, please forward them to us. That would be great help, and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Solari.
I have no objection.
I second
Okay.
that. This is Kevin.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I do oppose.
Nay.
Okay, thank you for your time this morning, Mr. Morris. What case are we going to next? What do you got there?
I have 29F.
Okay, thank you. This is regarding Palo Verde Health Services LLC, a variance, and I will let Mr. Morris open up and then ask board staff for a summary as well.
Sure. This is a request by Palo Verde Pharmacy for a variance from the board to allow pharmacist Brian Paoli, who is here, and you can, if you have any questions for him, you can speak with him. The board may remember, this is in Pima, Arizona, a very small town of less than 5,000 residents. the pharmacy just opened, and as part of the conditions for it opening, the board required the pharmacist to sign an attestation that the pharmacy would not fill any prescriptions authored by his wife, who is a nurse practitioner. She was not yet a nurse practitioner, but it was anticipated that she would become one and graduate shortly to be able to do that. He did that. The pharmacy has opened. The town has been very happy to have the pharmacy there. Since then, his wife, now a licensed nurse practitioner, has opened a clinic in the town, and numerous members of the town, including the mayor, the vice mayor, and most of the members of the town council, have asked that they be allowed to see his wife and have prescriptions filled there. His wife's nurse practitioner facility is the only medical facility in the town. It's the only facility within 50 miles that will see patients on the same day to go forward. And so they've asked that he be allowed to fill prescriptions that his wife prescribes. The issue in Arizona is ARS 32-1930B, which says that a board shall deny or revoke a pharmacy permit if a medical practitioner receives compensation either directly or indirectly from the pharmacy as a result of the practitioner's prescription orders. Obviously, his wife is a medical practitioner. She would receive compensation indirectly by the pharmacy filling those prescriptions. We're asking for a variance for the specific reasons of the locale that is here. While there are other pharmacies within 10 miles of there, they are not walking distance. They are not generally accessible for a lot of the population of the town that is there. It is creating a hardship for the patients that are there. We also want to point out that this law, when it was put in place, 32-1930, was more than 50 years ago. It was a different time period. One, we didn't have nurse practitioners. Two, we have a very different set of rules. And three, this law has not been followed or enforced in full by this board for a long time. If we take it at its strictest compliance, every doctor who owns shares of Walgreens or CVS or Walmart is in violation of those laws. Every hospital that is a for-profit hospital that has investors who are physicians and practitioners aren't there. More so and more interestingly now, every pharmacist who authors a vaccine order or authors prescriptions under the collaborative practice agreements and then fills those prescriptions would be in violation of the law. So our request is for the variance to be granted to allow this specific pharmacy under these unique circumstances to do so. The nurse practitioner will advise every patient that the pharmacy next door she has a financial interest in, and they are free to go to any pharmacy they choose, and they'll do that and disclose it to them and give them options of other pharmacies that are listed there. There are certain federal laws for certain federal programs that may limit some of the patients who are allowed to go there, but this will open up access to healthcare for an awful lot more patients. So with that, I have the pharmacist owner here. Brian, do you want to add anything?
No, you put it pretty succinctly. Yeah, like Roger said, it's a small community, a lot of elderly folk. It's hard to get around, no public transportation, very limited resources and transportation methods to get to the next nearest pharmacies where they're close to 8 to 10 miles away.
Thank you. Board members, any questions, discussion?
Mr. Chair, this is Kevin Dang. Mr. Morris and the owner, Brian, do the residents of this town aware of telemedicine? I know that these days, telemedicine is a pretty popular type of services where citizens of small town may be reaching out to their primary care doctor via Zoom call or telephone. Those could be options that I can think of.
Dr. Dang, I can't speak for the residents, and I'll let Brian in a second, but I'm sure they're aware of that, and that works in some options, but not others. Brian?
I was going to say most of the population is, not most, a lot of the population is elderly and are hesitant to use the digital or the telemedicine type of situations, or frankly don't care to learn it. You know, I can't speak for all of them, but in many cases that's what's going on.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'm reading this statute and it's pretty simple. Even a non-attorney like me is able to interpret this because it's written for me to understand. And it clearly prohibits this kind of practice. As far as Mr. Morris's points that every physician who owns stock in a company or every pharmacist who dispenses something, prescribes something and dispenses in the same pharmacy, I don't think this relates to that. Those individuals have no say-so in how their pharmacy is run. They get no personal compensation for doing that. It just seems like a reach to me. In addition, this is bad pharmacy practice, in my opinion. I think if a pharmacist receives a prescription that they disagree with and want to deny it, as we've seen several times with the ivermectins and the hydroxychloroquine prescription, you're a lot less likely to reject the prescription or call the prescriber if the prescriber also happens to be the owner of the pharmacy. So it doesn't work to the benefit of the patient either. As far as the driving distance goes, I drive 25 miles to work each way. So I don't think 8 to 10 miles is that big a deal. And even at a residential speed of 25 miles per hour in that zone, when you drive 8 miles, that's 20 minutes, which is the same amount of time it takes to prepare a prescription. So if you send the prescription to the pharmacy 8, 10 miles away, by the time you get there, it's ready. Or you can send the prescription to this pharmacy and by the time 20 minutes passes by, it's ready. I don't see why we need to make this exemption. Many pharmacies also have the option to deliver to homes these days. I don't know if that's available in this community, but pharmacies do that. So residents don't even have to leave their home. So I am not in favor of this exemption.
Thank you, Mr. Solari. Other comments, discussion?
I'll throw one final comment out with this is, again, the board's duty is to protect the public health and safety. The public, PEMA, is asking for this for their own health care and safety. And nothing about this is going to create a problem for it. It's getting them their medications sooner and accessing them with it. I know the board is always concerned about a slippery slope. This is a unique circumstance in a very small town. I would also suggest that Mr. Solari's example, while correct, if I have a pharmacist who owns his own pharmacy, the example I gave is absolutely correct. If they are authoring the prescription and filling it, the pharmacist who owns that pharmacy, not the chain drugstore pharmacist, but the independent pharmacist, is in exactly the situation that statute prohibits.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Kevin. So, Mr. Morris, I understand that the existence of the board pharmacy is to protect the citizens of Arizona from the safety perspective. The comment that you had just made just now, you mentioned that the citizens of PEMA is reaching out to the board for the safety and for their safety and for the enhancement of the pharmacy accessibility. I agree with the enhancement of the pharmacy accessibility for the citizens of PEMA, but I don't see safety as an issue here that we're talking about. I don't see why having a pharmacy providing drugs to these 5,000 lives living in this city would enhance safety. I don't see that as one of the excuses that you have brought up.
Just to respond, this board has a long history, particularly for rural Arizona, of looking to create opportunities to make sure that pharmaceuticals are available. Pharmaceuticals that aren't able to be dispensed timely to patients do create a public health and safety. And if I can get the pharmaceuticals to the patients sooner, I think there's a huge public health and safety benefit.
This is Jean Galvin. If I may remind the board that the issue is the request for deviation, and that falls under 321904B6. And it says that the board may grant permission to deviate from a state requirement for modernization of pharmacy practice, experimentation, or technological advances. So perhaps the board wants to discuss what facts you believe presented in this request do or do not meet that requirement.
Members, any questions?
Mr.
I'm not
President,
here, I'm not hearing any factors, unfortunately, and I am sensitive to a rural town, but I'm not hearing any factors that support a deviation. It is titled variance on the request, and that's why I didn't bring that up. But Mr. Minkus,
I'm in favor of doing this. I think this is a good idea and I think it would be beneficial to the community. So I will vote in favor of allowing the variance request. In fact, I'll make that my motion. Let's get that moving forward. I'll make a motion to approve the variance request for Palo Verde Health Services.
thank you, Mr. Minkus.
Yes.
I have a motion.
And second.
Any other discussion?
You know, growing up in a small town, I want to say yes to this because I completely understand having to go everywhere, long drives to get basic convenience things, to get food, to get hospital care, to get medical care. But I just think this is conflict of interest that Mr. Solari brought up is just too big an issue.
Understood. Thank you for your
And-
comments, Ms. Nair.
Dr. Leva?
Yes.
I tend to agree with you, Ms. Nair. I want to approve this request because I think it's the right thing ultimately for the community. Unfortunately, I don't think it meets the standards that we have set forward for us with for our ability to approve a waiver. Sorry, I couldn't articulate that. I just don't think that we have the ability to do that. I think that perhaps we need to look and see if the statute needs to be changed. I think that Mr. Morris brings up some very valid points. I think pharmacy practice has certainly changed a lot, but I don't see that this meets the qualifications for a deviation right now, unfortunately. I'd like to do it for the community because I do see the benefit to access, but and that's an unfortunate piece. I just feel like our hands are a little bit tied right here.
Did we get a second to the motion?
I believe Mr. Tong
Mr.
seconded the
Tong.
motion. So I have a motion and I have a second. I think we're going to be divided on this. May I ask for a roll call?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Mr. Solari,
Nay.
Mr. Dang,
Hey,
Mr. Minkus,
Aye.
Mr. Leva,
No.
Ms. Lehan,
Nay.
Ms. Walmsley,
No.
Mr. Tong,
Aye.
Ms. Nair.
Nay.
Motion fails, Mr. President.
Thank you for your time today, Mr. Morris.
Thank you.
Mr. President, do we actually need to take a motion to deny it rather than motion failing by, I'm just want to clarify that. Do we need a separate motion to deny this? Because as of right now, it hasn't been denied. The motion to approve it just failed.
I don't think so, but I'll defer to Mr. Hargraves and Ms. Galvin. We said no, in my opinion, as a board.
Probably to ensure that there's no question, a motion denying the request is probably appropriate.
Mr. Solari,
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to deny this special request.
thank
second.
you. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Hey.
2 nays. Noted. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Gandhi. Where to, and I hate to keep putting you on the spot, but I know so much is time sensitive, so I have to defer to you and Jennifer.
Nope, totally understand, Mr. President. We still have about 23 minutes before 10 o'clock. Let me just go through the attendance roster here, see if any guests are available. So we have, do we have anyone from BioCare on the call? Anybody from La Frontera Center? Rebecca Gray? call on the conferences, see if anybody's available from there, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Conference number 210540. Anybody present for that conference? Agenda item 25L 21-0565. Last but not least, hello, yes.
I am available, but I'm waiting on the clients to get here. So they should be here in the next 15 minutes or so.
Thank you, Mr. Lance. Agenda item 25M 25-0527.
I'm here.
Ezekiel,
Yes.
okay, are you ready to discuss your case, Mr. Ezekiel?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, Mr. President, if we can take 25M, Mr. Ezekiel's here.
Thank you very much. I'd like to note my recusal and ask Ms. Wansley to proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Leyva. Mr. Ezekiel, is anyone else present with you from Sunrise Pharmacy?
It's just me. I didn't know if I had to bring anybody else.
Okay, if you could please state your full name and position for the record.
My name is Ezekiel Kering-Gesitiller, and I'm a pharmacy in charge at Sunrise Pharmacy.
And you are the owner as well, just for the record?
I am the owner, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe Ms. Richardson was the compliance officer for this case. Ms. Richardson, can you please give us a brief summary of the case before us today? And then Mr. Ezekiel will give you the opportunity to make some comments after Ms. Richardson provides her summary.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So this complaint came about in December of 2021 when we received an anonymous complaint from a pharmacy technician alleging that the owner of the pharmacy was refusing to fill medications if a patient did not fill all of their medications at the pharmacy, and that they were refilling prescriptions without patient authorization, specifically being told that if the patient said they didn't need it, to tell them it was at no charge, there was no copay, and to take it anyways. On December 1st, both I and Elizabeth Dodge went to the pharmacy in Lake Havasu and spoke with the owner. He's also the PIC. We discussed the allegation with him that prescriptions are being automatically refilled without any patient request, and that the techs had said that they were told to just have the patient take it anyways because there was no copay. At that time, he said that he believed that that probably was true. So I started investigating at the pharmacy, reviewed some prescriptions to determine if there was any billing or dispensing irregularities. And we discovered back in their compounding room several bins of older filled prescriptions for patients that dated as far back as April of 2021. There are some photos in your packet to look at in the board book. One of the bins consisted of prescriptions for a patient RH. There were numerous prescriptions in there with bill dates ranging anywhere from April 21st of 21 to October 6th of 21. I do also have a list of those prescriptions and the fill dates for you to review as well. There were a total of 25 prescription bottles for just this one patient, as well as some undated partial custom medication packs. The individual units of the med pack were separated from the original pack and they weren't associated with any RX number or date. In looking at the profile for this particular patient RH, I determined that some of them were multiple fills for the same prescription number. For example, you have RX number 520071 on your list. It was filled on both 9/10 of 21. It was in the bin still. And there was also a bottle filled on 10/6 of 21 in the bin. There were prescriptions in there for this patient for 3 different strengths of levothyroxine, dated 9/21, 10/6, and 10/14. All of these were billed to Access and showed them as being dispensed in the computer. I did verify in the computer that all had a status of dispensed and they had a status of signed/delivered. These prescriptions were active, they were billed, and they were not reversed. Another bottle for a patient AT was found dated from June 22nd of 21. It had the patient name blacked out, which kind of implied that that was a return to stock bottle. However, the computer system still showed that claim as being dispensed, not reversed, and it had a status of signed and delivered. And there is a photo of that screenshot for you in your packet as well. Another partial bubble pack was found that had 6 tablets left in it. It originally contained 30, and the computer shows a billing for 30. We don't know if this was a return or what happened with this particular one. Another prescription dated in April of 21 was never reversed, but was again refilled on 5/20/21, despite the April dispensing still being in the back room. We discovered many medication packages labeled from other pharmacies, some of these being partial bottles or packs. There are a few examples of those photos as well in your packet. When we asked about all of these baskets of various prescriptions, the PIC stated that they were awaiting bubble packing. And we pointed out the dates in the basket for the one patient, for example, RH, and he told us that that particular patient was deceased. Ms. Dodge pressed him on this issue, and he changed his story and said she wasn't deceased. He did state that he also takes medications back from care facilities, and that may be where they came from, and that's where the ones from the other pharmacies came from. We did inform him that accepting prescriptions that had been dispensed from another pharmacy and then bubble packing them and labeling them with his pharmacy is not permissible, and that he is also not permitted to take any medications back for bubble packing or destruction because he's not a reverse distributor. During our inspection, we also found patient prescription bottles and stock bottles in the cabinet where compounding ingredients are stored. Of these, one of them was a controlled substance, and we initially ended up with a shortage on the audit, but then found this particular bottle in the cabinet. And then we also have a photo of that included for your reference. We found customized med packs that didn't contain all the required information. The beyond use dates were not compliant, and there was no packaging log included or maintained, which is required. We also found a total of 29 expired drug products. His self-certification to sell pseudoephedrine expired in 2020, and the products were still being sold. Some of the products, such as Zyrtec D, were not being processed through the required meth check system to get authorization to sell, and the sales were not reported, and ID was not being required. And that was the case with at least 2 products that we tested out under POS system. In his response to this complaint, the PIC states that if a patient doesn't want a prescription, it is returned to stock, and that the patient is not forced to pick it up. And I will leave that for you for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Board members, any questions for Ms. Richardson before we move on to Ezekiel for some comments? Hearing none, Ezekiel, would you like to make an opening statement regarding your assessment of the facts?
Yes, I would like to do that. Let me just turn on my video here so you guys can see me. There we go. All right, see who you are dealing with. Well, first thing first, when the inspectors came, Elizabeth Dodge and Ms. Sharon Richardson, when they came in, it was a busy day for us. It was a Friday. And we had a house full of people waiting to get their COVID shots. So it was really a stressful day for us to start with. So my apologies, I didn't give them enough time to really answer most of their questions, and in high view after they left, that's when I kind of looked at a lot of things, and really I think Ms. Dodge, if she's on the line, could attest to the fact that I did provide everything that she needed on the violations. And even with the bottles that were found in the compounding room, that they thought it was that contributed to the loss, it didn't contribute to the loss at all. There is an explanation of why, but I really don't want to get into that because we need to answer the complaint here. But if you guys want me to also touch on the results of the inspection, we can do that. But let's just, first of all, just touch on the complaint here that it's before us. When the inspectors came in, first thing they asked, it was just a casual question as they were working inside the pharmacy. Is I think Ms. Sharon Richardson did ask if we did automatic refills, and I said, of course we do. I didn't agree to the fact that we are forcing people to take stuff. I said, yes, we do automatic refills. So, and our automatic refills is different. You know, this is where we have to really define what automatic refills are. We don't have a system where people's prescriptions are actually put automatically in the system, or where the system just automatically fills stuff. We actually have to print a report of refills due and call people on that list. And in their profiles, there are people that we have in there that have okayed for us to fill their prescriptions automatically. So those people, yeah, we fill automatically, and we always call when their stuff is ready. So they come in and what have you. So, and if we look at the complaint, I don't know if you guys have the complaint in front of you. I doubt it originated from one of my employees, because it starts by, it seems like it's a third party, because the person who wrote this keeps referring to the fact that they do this, they do that, they do this, they do. It's not like we are forced to. I think it's a third person. It's not one of our technicians. So that's where I have a problem, because this patient also states the fact that we don't feel for veterans and what have you, and which is really wrong, because Sunrise Pharmacy is the only pharmacy, independent pharmacy in this town that really helps our veterans. We are the only pharmacy with Smiths of their bridge supply before they send their stuff from.
Not to interrupt you, but that's not one of the matters that we're considering here today. That isn't a violation of law, and I appreciate your comments, but let's keep it germane to the complaints that are before us today.
Yes, that's
Can
why.
I ask a specific question? Ms. Richardson brought up an example that had multiple fills on the same patient that was in the will call bin. Can you explain how that happened?
It's not in the will call bin. No, the baskets that Ms. Richardson is talking about here, which kind of we got into a tiff of an argument, which I really didn't appreciate, is the thing about those baskets is those things are not will call. Those prescriptions are prescriptions that the patient requested, and they are filled and they are paid for, but we keep them back there for adherence packaging. We keep, because as the board has already alluded, we cannot take medication back, so we keep them there for them. That's their basket. If the patient decides today that he doesn't want to use our adherence packaging, we bag everything and give it to them. And of course, Ms. Richardson also alluded about multiple levothyroxines. Those are the prescriptions that the doctor had prescribed and changed their, and especially when you talk about RH came to us as a challenge to the program, to the facility that he was in, not facility, but she is a foundation of there's a company that helps him with what do you call it, family assistance. So they assist her with medication or whatever in healthcare.
Okay, so I have a question. Adherence packaging, if it's multiple months, you have, let's say one was in September, one was in October, and you still have that at your store, how is that aiding in adherence?
So here is adherence packaging. The patients can decide to do either monthly refills, or they're gonna do 90 days. So most of these people are doing 90 days. So we keep that, they are filled and paid prescriptions in their baskets, because it also has their names in there. It has these names like RH.
Would you fill all 90 at one fill?
I will fill 90 at one fill and then do a monthly bubble packaging, adherence packaging monthly. Our adherence packaging is every 28 days. We do that, taking from their baskets in the back.
So what you're saying is you're billing a 90-day supply, but you're only giving them 30 because you're packaging it as in compliance packaging.
Yes, it's 28 days. So and then we continue with what they have. So until we continue with every month, we give them their supply of adherence packaging, but they are just billed one time.
So why aren't you billing for a 30-day supply if you're only giving them a 30-day supply or a 28-day supply? That's
the only problem is most of these people are not in a facility. They are just people that are requesting our end. Some of them, they really don't want to pay a copay that they can pay once every 90 days for instead of having to pay the same copay 3 times. So most of them, they choose to do a 90-day supply instead of, because some of them, they have 90-day suppliers for 1 copay instead of having to pay the same copay 3 times.
Yeah, but if you're giving 28 days,
Mhm.
that'll be like an 84-day supply. What are you doing with the other 6?
Oh, no, it's it's continuous. So what we do, this is their medication. It's not our medication. It's not, we just house it in our facility. So what we do is every 28 days, we just get from their basket and do adherence packages for them for that month. So that's why sometimes we have, there was one that we had an argument on one of the patients, because I didn't have enough. We had filled his adherence packaging, because we always want to have issues where we have some of them left over. So I could do a 28-day supply, but it's different because if it was a nursing facility, I will do a 28 supply and bill every 28 days. But because these people are feeling that it's like it's their medication, they are feeling their 90, they're feeling their 30, and they're asking us to make adherence packaging for them. So we just have to take from what they have and do the adherence packaging.
So as to Ms. Walmsley's question, why not do 30 days?
Like I said.
or 28. What is
Or
actually
28.
what you're actually supplying to them, which is what I believe all third-party plans require.
I was wondering also if this is an insurance fraud issue. I mean, because you're billing for something you're not giving the patient.
No, it's the patient. The patient can get that medication anytime.
Yeah, but it's billed for a certain day.
It's
and you're
their
saying it is
medication.
picked up on that day.
No, it's their medication. They paid for it, and they're asking us to do adherence packaging for them. See what I'm saying? It's
I know
not
that
like-
that's a big term to say insurance fraud, but I
No, it's
don't
not- it's
think
not an
this is
insurance
allowed
fraud.
by insurances.
It's not an insurance fraud, because if, like I said, if the patient comes in and says,
But
I
if they
don't
don't
want,
get what they were billed for at
they are
that
get-
time.
they are getting what they're billed for. We can do it. We can do it 2 ways.
No, I don't know.
We
that's
can.
correct.
Mr. Deng, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. So, Mr. Uzuki,
Yeah.
okay, aside from the possibility of insurance fraud and all that,
Yeah.
there's one other thing that I want to point out, and this is for my colleagues on the board.
Yeah.
Automatic refill for these patients, for all of your patients, without at least consulting their physician or routinely communicate with these people, to me, from the clinical standpoint, is very dangerous.
You say he
Case in-
calls them.
Case in point,
Yeah.
case in point,
Mhm.
as we all know, you may argue that you only do automatic refill for chronic medications.
Yes.
Well, then certain blood pressure medications,
Mhm.
the doses can be changed by the physician routinely.
That's
If
true.
you don't communicate with the patient nor with the physician, how would you know that the patient still on the same dose, the original dose, as you have
I
dispensed?
mean, that's a problem with any kind of automatic fill.
And
Yeah,
and-
but-
It is allowed. It's just
yeah.
his process he's saying is a manual process.
Can
And a
I
lot
add
of others
some-
are automated.
One moment.
Go ahead.
Can I add something? I'm sorry.
Who's speaking?
Elizabeth Dodge.
Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth.
So when we were there, so a lot of these fills were not just filled like 3 months ago. So there were a lot of fills that were filled last year. So there were multiple dates. So what he's saying, it doesn't seem to correspond with what we discovered at the pharmacy. And like Ms. Richardson said, when I asked him about it, the first one, he said that that patient was deceased. and then went back on it. So I guess I'm confused by why these were all supposed to be bubble packs, but it really didn't seem like that's what was going on when we were at the pharmacy.
All right.
And I will just add to that too. If you look at the one prescription that I had listed there, 52071, there was those were 30-day fills, and there was a fill from September 10th and a fill from October 6th in the basket. So if bubble packing was occurring, the September hadn't even been dispensed yet, and here October got refilled.
Like I said, because we do it every 28 days, and like I also have alluded, every basket that's back there, it belongs to the patient. It doesn't belong to us. So if the patient walks in today and says, I don't want adherence packaging anymore, their stuff is paid for. We communicate with these people. Their stuff is paid for. We just bag it up and give it to them. That's their medication. Now, I really want to go back to RH. We had 3 weeks of silence from her. We didn't know where she was. We tried to call everybody in our contact list, and RH was nowhere to be found. And I just assumed that RH must be deceased. So that's why when I was pressed, like, you know what, maybe I should try, because we deliver to her. I had the driver check on her every day of the week, every week, once a week when she did deliveries to make sure that RH is not home. We called the organization that the caretaker that was on our phone, on our list to contact. The caretaker said he doesn't work for that company anymore. We called that company and nobody seemed to know what happened to RH. So it just kind of put us in a bind. Lo and behold, just after the week after the board of pharmacy came, we got a call from the company that helps and says RH has been in a nursing home for the past 3 weeks, because every time they are due for, I have a list where the days that they are due for their bubble packing. So every time every time they are due, I make sure we call and make sure they are ready for their bubble pack. So RH came back. She was in a nursing home for something that happened. And they told us she wants to go back in and do her bubble packs, like the other adherence packages that we've been doing for her. And then we did 1 month. And then the next month when we called to see if she was ready, we couldn't get hold of her. So we called the facility, a company that was helping her, and they did tell us that now she was deceased. So I think she
What did you do with those claims at that point?
At that point, all that's our medication. It's already been built. So all we did is we just put it into our damage and return to send it to a reverse return.
But she never received that medication, and you billed her insurance company for it, correct? She never actually physically received the product that was paid for by her insurance company, and potentially her with a copay.
Well, she did. She actually did, because we did another bubble pack for her. Another adherence
she
package.
received part of it, but not all of it. So I think we've established here. We've established here. Just hang on a second.
Okay.
So board members, I think we've established that there are numerous billing inconsistencies, that this pharmacy is billing for prescriptions in advance of actually having the patients receive them. There are potentially claims that were made by the pharmacy for medication that was unreceived by the patient, that were paid for by their insurance plan, and potentially the patients themselves in some form of a copay. We have a number of other issues that we still also need to address that were brought forward as part of the investigation. I feel pretty comfortable that there are fraudulent billing practices that are occurring based on the evidence that the inspectors have found, as well as Mr. Ezekiel's own testimony today. But I'd be happy to entertain any other direct questions for him on that particular matter. Otherwise, I'd like to move forward with some of the other items. If that's acceptable.
Can I ask you a question before we go ahead? My question is, if I'm a customer and I ask and I do pass on and I still have medication left in my own home, is it not the same? I mean, do they have to return that to the pharmacy to be returned?
No, but the difference is that the patient has never actually received that product in their hand.
No, that's untrue, because the bubble packing might be their medication might be in our pharmacy for adherence packaging, but they already paid for.
But they never received it.
No, they have received it.
Ms. Walmsley, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
And maybe my lack of knowledge on adherence packaging or blister packing. But what stopped you, Mr. Ezekiel, from blister packing the entire quantity? 3-month supply or whatever. Why did you have to do it in 28-day increments?
Well, the only way I can do my bubble packing is every 28 days. So it's my cart only allows me to do every 28 days.
Okay, but yes,
And also,
you can do 3 cards for a patient for 3 months supply, correct?
That could be done. That could be done, but however, it cannot be done that way, because my bubble packing is not. It's a display. It puts different medications in one pocket, depending on what days they take. So according to.
Do you take Medicare insurance?
Medicare like Part D or Medicare like A and B?
D for prescription.
Yeah, we do take Part D.
And do you take Access?
Yeah, we take Access.
Hmm.
So the way we do our adherence packaging, we cannot do more than 60-day supply, because they are all in one together. It's not like a single card where we put one medication in each card. So with that kind, we cannot do more than 60 days.
Dr. Grundy, did you have any other follow-up questions?
Mr. Ezekiel, how many pharmacies have you owned?
Mr. Gandhi, I know you from Vegas.
Yes, and I remember your quote about the board asking you, that was an interesting name of your pharmacy.
Yes, I remember.
Right, Easy Fast Drugs.
Yes, I have done 2 pharmacies before. I owned 2 before, but this is the only one that I own. And really, integrity is running the pharma business in my name. My name is what I defend here. My integrity.
How long did you own those pharmacies?
I owned them for more than 5 years.
Did you have similar practice standards of those pharmacies too?
Yes, I had the same standards.
And why did you sell those pharmacies and open a new one and then open a new one after that?
So I all this time I was living in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, and my pharmacies were in Bullhead and Laughlin. So it got to a point where I was just tired of driving back and forth. And I just decided it's time to sell and and of course, there are times where the big pharmas give you an offer that you cannot refuse. So I decided to sell and sit back. But once you have been a business owner, it's tough to work for other people.
Thank you.
Mr. Gandhi, has this information been turned over to CMS? Just curious.
Not at this time, Ms. Nair. Obviously, the board can direct us to do that, but we haven't done that yet.
I would like to do that. If you want me to make a motion, I can do that.
I think we should continue to discuss the other items here. There's a lot of other things we still need to address. I feel like I think that might be a little premature.
Okay.
Yes, Kevin.
Okay, so I have one last question for Mr. Zuki. You mentioned that all these medications were already paid by the patients. Did they actually call you and give you their credit card number or some sort of payment?
Yes.
So they pay the copay?
Yes.
Okay.
technically it's not in will call, it's something that they already paid for, and we're just holding it in our facility to do a monthly adherence packaging for them.
After they paid for those prescriptions?
Yes.
Did you inform them that these medications are kept at your pharmacy?
Yes, that's
for them?
yes, that's the arrangement we had with the patients.
So then the subsequent question I have for Ms. Dodge and Ms. Richardson is, during your inspection, did you find out that all these medications were actually paid by the physician, by the patient, and stored at the pharmacy, Ms. Dodge?
Several of them had a zero copay, so I'm not sure if the patient was aware that they were filled. Some of them, like I said, were filled last year, so I can't imagine storing a medication for that long and it's just sitting at his pharmacy.
This,
like I said,
in my opinion, this is
like-
not at
like I
all
said-
an appropriate practice with regard.
Like I said, Ms. Dodge, like I said, all this stuff is the stuff that patients, even if it's if they stop taking the stuff, I don't just throw it away. It's their medication. I just keep it there. If the doctor stops the medication, it's not mine. It's theirs. I just keep it in there, just for them to let me know what to do with it.
And to add to that, so we would find like multiple fills of the same drug. So it wasn't like he would wait for one bottle to finish out the 3 months. There were multiple fills. So I was confused by that too, Ezekiel.
Which one had multiple fills? Can you give
There
me?
were several of them. I think that they're in the file here. But is that a common practice for you to do as well?
It's not a common practice. The only problem that we are having is when the prescription is due for refills, we call them and let them know we are filling the next fill for the next 90 days. So when you say multiple fills, sometimes I would have a little bit left from one bottle that wouldn't carry her to the next bubble pack, so we'd have to fill for the next month. So it's or for the next fill. So I know it's a confusing setup, and the board, it's tough for the board but it's something that has really worked for us and the customers that we are bubble pack. And we are only talking about maybe 8 customers. It's not like we are talking about 50 or 100 customers that we are doing this for. So it's just a minute few that we are doing this for. So yes, there's a possibility of finding not multiple. I don't think there's any that had like 3 different fields.
Okay, I don't think we're getting to any new information here. All we're doing is arguing the same point over and over. I'd like to move on to one of the other violations that was found as a part of the inspection, if that's okay with the other board members.
But Ms. Laurie, you guys are putting me here in a spot. So I really have to make sure that we understand where we are, because we cannot
Mr. Ezekiel, I appreciate hearing from you, but you're not adding any new information to this conversation. You just keep saying that you don't believe that what you're doing is inappropriate. And I don't believe that the other board members or myself have that same feeling, nor did our inspector. So at this point, we have a number of other pieces that we need to get to. And unless there's some new information that you have, I would like to move on with the other violations that were found as a part of your inspection.
Okay.
Additionally, as found as part of the inspection was the expired meth check certification and the inaccurate or lack of documentation of selling pseudoephedrine products. Can you describe what occurred there from your perspective?
I don't really, that one, I really don't know what happened. I don't know if it's a POS issue or whatever, but there were some, well, on my expression of the meth set, that's my problem. It kind of eluded me, but I did renew it. But with the POS, as we all know, all this stuff is kept in the back. So every time we sell it, we have to ask for an ID and whatever you. But we didn't, during the time that Ms. Dodge and Ms. Richardson was there, we did notice that some of them were not pulling up so I had to do a little bit of research and find out why it's not sending from the warehouse as a drug that is under a product that is restricted. So I reached out also to my software vendor and asked them what's going on here, and they did show me how to fix that problem. So it looks like the system somehow once in a while drops, and it's just something that I have to keep on top of it at all times.
So, Ms. Dodge or Ms. Richardson, correct me if I'm wrong. When you did the inspection, it was noted that his self-certification to sell the pseudoephedrine products expired in 2000.
It expired on 9/30 of 2020.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant, 2020. Yeah. Apologize for that. Mr. Ezekiel, as the owner, are you not required to renew your certification?
Yes, I am required to renew my certification.
So why didn't you do that if you continued to sell these products?
Like I said, I don't know what happened. I just forgot to renew that license for some reason. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see what else we had here.
You want to address the issue of taking medications from other places and bubble packing?
Yes, please go ahead and go there, Dr. Solari.
Dr. Casatello, please explain to me why you're taking medications from other facilities and pre-packing them at your facility.
Which I didn't know it was because some of the people, when they get admitted, in there's a little nursing home that I take care of, or assisted living that I take care of. So when they admit people, sometimes they have me do a medication review for them, and sometimes they ask me to do adherence packaging for them. So and that's where some of the drugs from other pharmacies find a way into the pharmacy. That's how that happened. So
I just want to understand clearly, are you the nursing home consultant for this facility? Do you do nursing home consulting? What do you mean when you say you go to these facilities?
There's only one that I consult for.
And then as part of your consultation, do you recommend that they do adherence packaging yourself, or do they ask you to do it? Is that not a conflict of interest? Isn't the whole point of the nursing home consulting for you to be independent of the nursing home?
No, they don't ask me to do it, nor do I ask them for the adherence. And some of their clients over there don't even do adherence packaging. There are some that they would ask me to do adherence packaging for them, but I don't push for that.
Did you know that this is inappropriate practice to take back meds from other places?
Now I know.
And then do you own a reverse distributing license, sir?
That's something that I now want to apply for because it's because this nursing places wants to, where every time somebody gets deceased or dies, they want to have us dispose of the medication. So that's something that I'm looking into right now.
Can I also?
And we don't take stuff from outside anymore. So.
You've discontinued that practice?
Yes, I discontinued that.
Can I go back to something Dr. Gandhi brought up? Do you currently own any pharmacy other than this one in Arizona or elsewhere?
No, this is the only one.
And then going back to why the practice was discontinued, why you sold those other pharmacies, were you ever cited or had violations with other boards of pharmacy?
Not at all. Not at all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Madam
Mr. Dang, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. So, Mr. Ezekiel, how long have you been operating this pharmacy?
It's only 3 years, 2.5 years.
Okay, so 2.5 years. And all these 2.5 years, you have not established any contract with the reverse distributor company.
I haven't, but it's something that I looked at before, but
that alone raised a big red flag, in my opinion.
Okay.
We know that drugs do expire.
Yes. Oh, no. Sorry, Mr. Deng. I do have I do have a reverse
No,
distributor that I send.
He
back.
is not a reverse distributor.
I'm
So
not
he
a
can't
reverse
take
distributor.
medications from other pharmacies to dispense them.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
no, I don't. Yes, I don't take stuff from other pharmacies to dispose of. I'm not
Or
a,
to
but
reuse or whatever. your
yes,
practice
but
is.
I have expired stuff. There's a place where I send. I have a reverse distributor that I send stuff to.
and
So-
what is that company's name?
The company's name is. Let me look it up here real quick. Good question. All right. Should have some of their. Well, you asked me of names, Mr. Deng, when you are.
I know, well, that's important, because if you know you have one set up already, you should know the name of that reverse distributor.
Yeah, so while you're looking that up,
Yes, go
just to keep the conversation moving,
Yes.
our inspectors found a number of products that were expired. Can you tell us what your process is to make sure that you're dispensing in-date products, and how you, what's your process for pulling expired products and sending those products to this unnamed reverse distributor that you're looking to find?
Unnamed. It's called Return Solutions. Sorry, Return Solutions. I just hit a blank. You know, to be fair to us, Ms. Dodge and Ms. Sharon, Ms. Richardson showed up December 1st, and every drug that is expired on our shelves have a little dot that has a date and whatever. So we, just because 2021 has just been a year that stuff, it's just been it was a crazy year. So we had not yet pulled our November, but it was already tagged to be pulled. So we tag we tag up to 3 months down the road. So every month we take 3 months up the road. So it was already tagged to be returned. So we just like that in that month of November, December, we were so busy with COVID shots that some of our normal daily pharmacy routine kind of suffered a little bit. So they were already tagged to be returned. It's just they showed up on the 1st. So we just didn't have enough time to pull them. But there's never been any place or point where we used something that was expired. So we do.
How far out do you pull your returns? So right now it's the month of April.
So
what month? How far out are your returns pulled today?
So April, when it's April, all the Aprils have been pulled already, and towards the middle of April, we'll start pulling the May.
But you just said earlier in the meeting that you dispense a lot of 90-day supplies. So if I were to come and have my prescription filled at the beginning of April, you're telling me that some of the medications may expire in May?
And we won't fill it if it's short dated like that.
So how far out are you pulling your returns?
So I pull everything for the next month. So this month we are pulling for May.
So how are you filling 90-day supplies?
90-day supplies,
Yes.
we just fill them regularly.
But if you only have 30 days of
but-
dating of some of the product on the shelf, how are you filling a 90-day supply of a prescription?
We won't fill a 90-day supply with something that expires next month. That one we won't do.
What's your process to ensure that you don't do that during the filling?
Because everything is tagged. If it's expiring in a month, it's tagged.
Ms. Walmsley, this is Sharon.
Yes, go ahead.
If I can direct you to 2 of the photos in your packet. There's 2 photos of expired drug product. And as you can see on those, they are not tagged and they were not pulled. One of the photos is all compounding ingredients that were used to make compounds. And again, those were all not pulled, and you can look at those and see there are no tags on them either.
Yeah, and on the compounds, I'm the only one who does complicated compounds. So those ones, there was no way they could be used. So, and it's been a while since it had been a while since I went through my compounding stuff to pull expired stuff. So if it's expired, that means we never used it.
But we did pull those from various places throughout the pharmacy. It wasn't just one spot.
Yes, I know. But most of the ones that you guys pulled were do they have the tag for the 11 for 11 on it?
No.
And then the 3 that you found on our compounding, they had tags, but they had expired a long time ago. That one I know. That's why they were in the compounding cabinet.
So Mr. Ezekiel, you said you've been open for 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Richardson or Ms. Dodge, is this the only time other than the opening inspection that this pharmacy has ever been inspected by our board?
That's correct.
Okay, due to COVID and the timing and all those things?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Deng, did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Izuki, you explained to us that you and your staff pull expiring products at least 30 days in advance, but how come our compliance officer were able to pull 29 expired items?
Like I said, most of those.
And not to mention, you mentioned that you have Return Solution as your reverse distributor.
Like
Would it make sense that all these 29 expired items should have been placed in the box label?
Yes, being segregated. That's true. Like I said, most of them, the boards, the inspectors showed up on the first, and I had like I have already alluded, it had been a busy 2 months for us. November, December was very busy because we were pressed on the COVID side. We were giving a lot of COVID vaccines, so and being short-staffed, we all know here. I don't know if most of you guys here own businesses or whatever you, or have been working in a pharmacy, right? Worked in the pharmacy in 2021. It was tough. We just had to do. There were some aspects of our pharmacy side that really suffered a lot. But if we look at all the stuff that expired, you would see that there was not a lot of stuff that expired like 3-4 months ago, except for the compound stuff that I hadn't time to look through.
A question for Ms. Richardson, or Ms. Dodge. In this photo that I'm seeing with all the baskets, it's page 3304. What am I seeing here? Are these the drugs that he took back? I just need a refresh.
What was the page number again, Ms. Snare?
3304.
Those were the drugs that were filled that Ms. Richardson and I found that were in a room with all the other baskets. So one basket would be all for one patient. So for instance, the basket on the right, that is one that he's alleging he would then use those filled prescriptions to do his customized med packs.
And he didn't have the appropriate documentation for the med packs either, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And you can also look, there is an additional photo for patient RH, and you will see there's actual bubble packs, opened bubble packs, separated bubble packs. So again, if the point of that was to do the adherence packaging and give it out to the patient, we've got opened ones, incomplete ones, still sitting there in the pharmacy.
Well, can I clarify on those opened ones?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so the open ones, if the doctor changes something on the patient's adherence packaging or what have you, usually we would have the patient bring it back so we can correct the bubble pack. And if the bubble pack was way already used by the patient, we will just reissue them a new one.
What would you do with the drug that they brought back?
That's the medication. I just leave it in that basket.
So if they brought back like 10 milligrams, the doctor changed it to 20, the 10 milligrams you just hang on to and don't do anything with?
It's not mine. I just put it in that basket.
And those bubble packs that are tore apart have no dates on them. So you don't know a beyond use date or when it was packed.
Walmsley, if I may chime in.
Yes, please, Dr. Gandhi.
There was a question about Mr. Ezekiel owning other pharmacies and if he had violations in the past and so forth. And I just want to note that Mr. Ezekiel did own Easy Fast Pharmacy. It was inspected, opening inspection was 2012, follow-up inspection 2016, and there were violations issued, and some being discussed today. One was excessive, outdated, mislabeled medications, and the other one we were touching on was methamphetamine precursors requires electronic tracking system submission to NPLEX. Please implement immediately. So there were 5 other violations issued, but those 2 kind of came up in a discussion, so I wanted to point those out to the board.
Thank
again,
you.
I
I don't
believe-
think that plays a bearing on our decision today, since that isn't before us, but thank you for the context.
No, my only comment, that comment was because Mr. Ezekiel said he had no violations historically, so.
Yeah, but I don't think those violations were ever communicated to us. I'm not so sure if because yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I did ask and he said no, and Dr. Gandhi has now found evidence that he misinformed the board. So I am disappointed that he did not tell us the truth.
So board members, I think we've addressed at least all of the major items that Ms. Richardson and Ms. Dodge found upon the inspection. Is there any discussion or further questions, or are we ready to start thinking about the motions? Okay, I guess I'll start. As I see it right here, I think that there is sufficient evidence that there are numerous record-keeping issues, whether it be for the bubble packing, compliance packaging not being in compliance, expiration dating not being correct on some of the packages that are left in the patient's bin. There are violations for accepting medications from a competitor that were then redispensed potentially to a patient. There's the expired medications issue that is found in the pharmacy. And I do understand the timing of COVID and all the pressures that it put on the pharmacy. So I do respect your service to the community during that time, especially Mr. Ezekiel. And then probably to me, one of the biggest issues, then there's the pseudoephedrine issue. So the violation of the state and federal law for submitting that information, as well as selling those products without a proper license to do so. And then the billing issues that we've noted today. So as I see it, we have really 5 violations here before us. Am I missing anything, or does anyone disagree based on what we've heard before us today, board members?
No disagree.
So that's I guess the starting point for our discussion. So thoughts on how we want to address each of those issues.
I almost think maybe an outside consultant would be appropriate to talk about the practices and what changes should be made.
Just to say a few things. I think
Mr. Ezekiel, at this point, we're in the point of discussion. So I'd ask that you please refrain from making comments. The board is in discussion at this point.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Even if his intentions are good, the practice is not.
Right. Madam Chair.
Yeah, Kevin.
So in addition to the outside consultation as suggested by Kristen, perhaps we should consider $1,000 fine for each of the violation. So that would be $5,000 fine.
That's kind of where my head was. And I mean, whether he wants to hire a consultant or not, I think that's a great idea, but perhaps even an inspection at his cost, say, for example, maybe in 6 months. And then if he needs a consultant, he can decide to do that. I don't think that we need to impose that on him, but I think we've noted significant enough operational issues here that I think that's a good solution, but I don't know that I think it needs to be included in a consent agreement. But I would like to see his pharmacy re-inspected sooner than later, personally.
Madam Chair, I think Ms. Snare initially also entered a discussion about us forwarding this investigation to other agencies. Is that?
I also think that would be appropriate. Board members, additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely.
Would
I
that
really think
include-
he needs the direction. I think that he may not seek it out, and I think it would be beneficial. And by that, I mean the consultant.
So does somebody want to take a stab at a motion?
So I make a motion to impose a fine of $1,000 for each of the violation. And the owner would have to pay for the re-inspection by our compliance officers. And obviously, seeking out to consultant to assist him with the compliance of the pharmacy regulation would be optional. So that's my motion.
And to notify other agencies, appropriate agencies that are involved.
Yes.
Mr. Dang, you said impose. Are you offering, did you mean to offer a consent agreement
Offer a
for
consent agreement for
civil penalty?
Yes.
$1,000 per violation? And did I hear correctly that the board feels that there's at least 5 violations here?
Yes.
And what's the time frame to pay that?
30 days.
Okay.
If it's not part of the consent agenda, can we just recommend in the consent agenda that he reaches out for a consultant?
Well, first of all, I want to address, there's also a pay for a re-inspection. When is that re-inspection to be done?
Ms. Dodge and Ms. Richardson, do you think the reinspection can be done within 30 days period?
Yes, we can make that happen.
Thank you.
So the re-inspection, you said within 30 days?
30 days, yes.
And you
I
said
think
hire
that might be a
consultant.
little bit fast for all of these changes that we're requiring. Not to be adversarial, Kevin.
I just feel yeah, it's I think it's a little bit on a short notice, but for patient safety and a majority of these can be, in my opinion, can be corrected easily within 30 days. That's why I don't see it's going to be a problem for the pharmacy owner to have the pharmacy have all these issues correct. A lot of them are related to billing and removing expired items and documentations. So I think 30 days would be appropriate. But if the other board members think that we should extend it to 60 days, I'm fine with that.
There was a suggestion by Ms. Snare that he consult with a pharmacy practice expert. And that is just a suggestion and not an order. But if you're trying to encourage him to do that, I would think 30 days would be an insufficient time for a reinspection. He should be given an opportunity to hire that consultant if he wishes and have that consultant come in and work with him. So I would think even a 60 days might be too short if we are really serious about him getting consultation.
Okay.
I think that needs to be clarified too, because I believe Mr. Dang indicated hire a consultant. So is it recommending?
Recommended.
Or is it going to be a requirement for him?
It is not a requirement. I mentioned earlier that it's an option for the pharmacy owner to decide.
Can I wanted to ask if you thought probation is a good way to go here, because we could compel him to do more down the road if he's on probation. We may want to put that on him as well at this point.
I think that's a good idea.
In addition to the fine?
Yes, sir. I'm just suggesting that because down the road, if he doesn't take the appropriate corrective action, we have more options at our disposal. He's already, based on what Dr. Gandhi found in Nevada, he's already been told, been aware that there are some deficiencies, and he's failed to fix them with his new pharmacy. So maybe a probation is a good way to go to make sure down the road we have more options.
I can amend my motion to include probation.
Madam Chair, if I may jump in.
Yes, go ahead.
I know there's some serious concerns here with this pharmacy, with billing and how things are managed. Just for food for thought for you guys to consider is doing a probation for a year and allowing board staff to inspect to 2 inspections, 1 within 3 months and then 1 within a year timeframe. That gives us a more comprehensive picture of what his practice evolved to at 3 months, and then if it maintained after a year time period.
I like that.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi.
Okay.
So Kevin, do you want to rephrase all of that just so we make sure
Yes.
everybody's clear on what the motion is?
Yes.
And see if somebody wants to second.
Which
Okay.
would also
so-
include probation, I'm sorry. to put that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my amended motion would be $1,000 fine to each of the violation, including 1 year of probation. All need to be paid within 90 days, and compliance officers will go out and re-inspect the pharmacy within 90 days, period. And then again, in a year later from
today, or whenever the order is drafted.
Yep. Mhm.
Paid for by the permittee.
Yes.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I think we missed a couple of key points there. That we communicate the information to the appropriate.
That's
Other
a-
agencies.
That's a separate direction to board staff, not part of the consent agreement, Ms. Nair. So after
Oh,
this,
I'm just thinking the motion, part of the motion. Okay. And then you just said violations, but just to clarify the 5 that we
5.
had discussed.
Yep.
Those are only 2 things that stood out to me, Kevin.
So 5 total, $1,000 per violation, total of 5 violations. So that's $5,000 plus 1 year probation. And pharmacy will be re-inspected by the compliance officers within 90 days period. And then follow-up inspections should happen in a year.
failure to comply goes to hearing directly, or unsatisfactory inspection resulting in the same violations also move to hearing, or can we do that, Seth and Jean, or?
I think an unsatisfactory inspection should come back to the board for review.
Yes.
So that way,
Even
there could be
if they were
separate
repeat
issues.
violations?
The board can decide at that point it may be a violation of the consent agreement, but it would be up to the board to decide at what time, based upon what inspection failures there are, what's the best course of action.
But failure to pay the fine within 90 days would be moved to hearing then.
Move to hearing.
Or failure to sign the consent.
Okay.
Everybody got that. So I have a consent agreement with a total of 5 violations for $5,000 total, as we discussed earlier, to be paid within 90 days. But the 2 additional inspections, 1 at 90 days, 1 at a year follow-up, to be paid for by the permittee. If the fine is not paid or the consent is not signed, we'll move to hearing. And in addition to that, the information will be forwarded to the appropriate agencies as direction to the board staff.
Yes.
And then probation for 1 year.
Oh, yes, and probation for 1 year. I'm sorry.
Were we going
Yes,
to put the recommendation of consult, or do you want to leave that out? It's been said.
You can put it in the consent agreement as a recommendation.
Okay, recommendation for consultation.
So I have a motion by Mr. Dang. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Do I have any further discussion by board members?
Yes, ma'am. I just want to clarify, are these against the permit or just against his license?
A permit.
And I agree with the permit. It's a pharmacy, but I just want to be clear that the consent agreement is directed to the permit Sunrise Pharmacy.
What if he were to close the pharmacy tomorrow? I would still want some kind of maybe.
You're right, but he would need to notify the board within 10 days of closing. At that point, we could readdress this at the next board meeting.
Okay. Okay.
So are you good with that since you were the second?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, Dr. Gandhi, if you could please do a roll call.
Mr. Solari,
Aye.
Mr. Dang,
Aye.
Mr. Minkus,
Aye.
Mr. Leba's recused, Ms. Lehan,
Aye.
Ms. Walmsley,
Aye.
Mr. Tong,
Aye.
Ms. Nair.
Aye.
Ayes have it with one recusal, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Thank you, Mr. Ezekiel, for being on the call today. The board staff will be in communication with you with the consent agreement. Appreciate your time and attendance.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Dr. Laidlaw, I will move to your direction.
Okay, board members, I want to judge your comfort level. Would you like a break?
Yes.
Or do you want to need a break? Okay.
Yes.
Let's do a 10-minute break, and then we will come back with K and L. And Dr. Gandhi, I believe we're wrapping up after that, going into special request and then completion.
That is correct. And before Crystal puts up the time countdown, you guys can take your break. I'll just take a poll of who's here and who's not, if that's all right.
Okay. All right. Let's recess for a 10-minute break and then reconvene. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. For those folks that are in the audience here on a Zoom call, looking for someone representing 25K 21-0540.
Yes, sir. This is Thomas Mooring.
Thomas Mooring. All right. Thank you for that. And you'll be ready to go once the board resumes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, 25L, case number 21-0565. Anybody in the audience for that?
Yes, Luis Lance is available, and we are ready to go whenever you are.
Sounds good. Thank you, Luis. Going to special request, we have BioCare. Are they in the audience?
Hello, yes, this is Kathleen Hopping. I'm here and ready.
Thank you, Kathleen. Next on the list is 29D for La Frontera. I believe I see them. Rena?
Yes, I'm here as well as Colleen Vineyard.
All right, thank you. And last on the list would be Rebecca Gray. I see you, Rebecca.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to unmute. Yes, I'm here.
All right, I think we have all accounted for. We will resume as soon as the board comes back, and we'll go in the order that I call these cases. I'm
Hi,
sorry.
excuse me.
Thank you.
Hi,
Yes.
excuse me.
Yes.
So I'm supposed to be in a meeting at 10 a.m. I have a deviation request. This is Xian from Red Rock Pharmacy, but nobody has ever called me yet.
Which one? Red Rock Pharmacy? Red Rock Pharmacy was tabled yesterday because of another matter that's being discussed.
I have a special deviation, so they told me the email sent to me says the meeting of April 7th at 10 a.m.
That is correct. You did receive that notification, but as the board was discussing another matter yesterday, it was in connection with the other matter, so they tabled your discussion until the other matter is resolved. So we'll be in communication with you after this board meeting, sometime next week or the week after, to give you next steps, okay?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Crystal, we're on break.
Okay, board members. Dr. Gandhi, could you take a roll call to establish a quorum?
Early, Mr. Chair. Mr. Solari,
Ready, sir.
Mr. Dang,
I'm here, sir.
Mr. Minkus. Mr. Minkus, Mr. Leva,
Present.
Ms. Lehan,
Present.
Ms. Wamsley,
Here.
Mr. Tong,
Present.
Ms. Nair,
Here.
Mr. Minkus. Mr. President, I'll keep an eye out for Mr. Minkus.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Okay, so moving on, unless I hear different, we are looking at,
25K, Mr. Chair.
yes, conferences 25K, and that is MD 24 Pharmacy, and Jenny Du, Tan Du, and Lee Kao Win. And I will pause for a moment to see if we have representatives present. And then after that, I would ask Ms. Richardson to give a summary of the case, and then I'll go back to the respondents for a summary as well.
Thank you, Dr. Leba. This is Thomas Mooring of the law firm Jayberg and Wilk, appearing in response to complaint number 21-0540. Jenny Du is with me on the call today and available for conference with the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Morning, are you representing the permit or just Ms. Du?
The permit, sir.
Okay, and are you licensed to practice law in the state of Arizona?
Yes, I am. For the record, my state bar number is 021247.
Thank you. And then did I hear somebody else introduce themselves?
Yeah, Jenny Du, I'm here.
Okay, welcome.
For the record, Mr. President, Mr. Ruben Minkus has joined the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Richardson, before I ask Mr. Morning for a statement, would you give a summary of the case, please?
Yes, sir. The Board of Pharmacy staff became aware of some indictments for Lin Kao Win, that he had been indicted on 50 counts of healthcare fraud associated with his medical practice. He is a physician, and he is one of the owners of Med24 Pharmacy. On October 29th of 2021, I went to the pharmacy to investigate. A complaint was opened based on these indictments. And when I arrived at that location, there was no pharmacy. There was only a telemedicine doctor practice, which was owned by Dr. Wynn. The individuals that were present the day I arrived there were not aware of a pharmacy having ever existed there. MDI-24 Pharmacy was issued a permit in August of 2019, and the permit was subsequently opened on 12/27 of 2019 after passing an inspection. Jenny Du as the PIC and her husband Than Du as owner or co-owner, and then a business development manager had appeared before the board back in August of 2019 for their application for the permit. At that time, the business model was presented as performing MTM services only, no dispensing. There were some concerns from the board at that time about a conflict of interest and some patient consent forms. They were asked to reappear in the afternoon at that meeting with those consent forms so that the board could review them. The board did have some billing concerns and questioned the existence of a current DME permit at the address, but ultimately did open or approve their application at that point pending inspection. On September 5th of that year, Dennis Wagner and myself conducted the opening inspection, and Jenny Du as PIC was present at that time. It was located within a medical practice to do MTM. We did have some concerns at that time with some of their SOPs as well as some security issues. Those issues ultimately were resolved. They had provided some documents via email on December 24th, and then the permit was changed to a status of open on December 27th of that year. In their response to the complaint through their attorney, Jenny and Than Du stated that they were involved in a joint venture to open a pharmacy at this location, but that no pharmacy had ever opened there. Again, Dennis Wagner and myself did an opening inspection there, and their permit was indeed opened. According to the permit profile, Jenny Du ended her PIC status there on 10/10/19. So after our inspection, but before the permit was opened. No other PIC was ever named on the profile, so it appears that this permit has been open since October of 2019 without a PIC. The permit today is suspended as a result of this complaint. There is also an open and active DME permit at the same address, same suite number as the pharmacy. It's issued to SIP MD. They most recently renewed this in 2021. It expires in 2023. Our DME inspector, Melanie Thayer, has visited this permit 3 times and notified them each time that a permit is not required for DME for a medical practitioner. She did not conduct an inspection, instead told them that they could close that permit. In November of 2019, the most recent time that she was there, they told her that they would close the permit, but the permit was again renewed in 2021 and is open to this date and is subject to inspection by this board. Jenny Du did open her own pharmacy in 2017 and closed in 2020. At the time that I wrote this report, her profile still showed that she was the pick at that pharmacy, Sunrise Valley Pharmacy, even though it is closed and no longer in business. I do see that she has since updated her profile, and she put an end date of her employment there in 2021. Again, that pharmacy closed in 2020. In addition, she has never listed herself as PIC or any employment at MD24I Pharmacy. That is not listed anywhere on her personal profile. And as of today, she has no employment listed. And I will open that up to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Mr. Mooring, would you like to make an opening statement?
Thank you. Yes, I want to address some of the overlap that we see here and provide the board with a little bit of background. So Jenny Du was the owner of Sun Valley Pharmacy. And as you heard from Ms. Richardson, it was opened in 2017. She realized that this was a difficult industry and she was in a difficult position as an independent pharmacist. And so beginning in, I believe it was 2019, she was approached by a large pharmacy chain that offered to essentially buy out the patients that were affiliated with that pharmacy. And they said, look, we don't want to run it for you. We want you to close it down. But there was a transition process during which the sale was ongoing. And during that time, she was requested to maintain her license status. So that sale, when it was completed, she did terminate as the PIC at Sun Valley Pharmacy. In the interim, the overlap period there, she had been approached as a joint venture. She and her husband, Than Du, had been approached to join as joint ventures with the idea of establishing an MTM pharmacy at the location, as it turns out, geographically only about a block away, at the location that we've noted was the medical practice for MD24 at that time. So she agreed, and the process was very much as Ms. Richardson described it. They met with the board, addressed some concerns in August of 2019, and then went forward with the process. And you heard that the opening inspection was conducted in September. During that time, they were still proceeding as joint venturers. Candidly, the process got very expensive, and Mr. and Mrs. Du realized that the economics of this joint venture was not something that they were willing to bear. They didn't think it would be profitable for them. Therefore, Jenny Du decided that they would sever that joint venture agreement. However, they left it to MD24 the option to find another pharmacist if that was what they wanted to do, so that there would be a replacement PIC. And as you noted, Ms. Du resigned prior to what I understand to be the opening date, if I have my notes correctly. The opening date of the permit, or the official opening on the board records, would have been 12/27 of 2019. It's my understanding that MD24I Pharma never found another pharmacist, and in fact, no medication was ever dispensed pursuant to that license. And so Ms. Richardson's earlier statement that when she arrived in October of 2021, no one was familiar with there being a pharmacy on site is accurate. What is really the case, and I understand this is important, but what is the case is there's an open or had been an open, but now I think suspended permit for that location, but no pharmacy business was ever transacted. No dispensing, no MTM, no nothing. And so there is a failure to provide a proper closeout here. That's certainly the case. And this came to the attention of Mr. and Mrs. Dew when the investigation revealed that. And so what is the reality is that there was a process undertaken pursuant to board regulations to open a pharmacy that resulted in a license being issued and a pharmacy being opened of record, but no pharmaceutical business of any kind ever took place. And therefore, frankly, Ms. Dew didn't realize when she parted the joint venture, didn't realize what the status was and didn't feel it was appropriate for her to close down the entire joint venture. She sort of left it for MD24 to decide what to do. MD24 apparently decided not to pursue the opening of a pharmacy. And there is no question that it was not appropriately closed. But in terms of, I think of that as administrative error and certainly not some of the patient error that we've already discussed today. So with that, I would open myself up to any questions and see if there's any information I could provide.
Thank you, Mr. Mooring. I may have misunderstood, but when I asked you earlier if you were representing the Dews or you're representing MD I-24 Pharmacy, you said both, but I feel like you would know the answer to some of those questions if you were representing the permit, the MD I-24I Pharmacy. Is that a different owner?
So the third name that was mentioned, Lin Sao Win, was the owner at that time of MD24.
Okay, and just to be clear, you're not representing Lin Cao Win.
I'm not here on his behalf as an owner, but I did investigate the matter, and I do believe if you have questions, I can answer them. And I apologize if my summation wasn't clear about that.
Well, I'm still not sure. Ms. Galvin, it appears to me that he is not able to answer on behalf of MD 24I Pharmacy, but he can for the Dews. Am I correct? You're on mute, Ms. Galvin.
That's correct. And based upon his knowledge, he may be able to answer some questions about the formation. If he doesn't feel that he can adequately provide you information about the MD24, he will let you know, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Leba, this is Sharon Richardson. Yes. Of note, Mr. Dew, Than Dew, is also an owner of the pharmacy.
Thank you. Okay, I appreciate that. And where is Mr. Mooring, Lin Cao Win?
He's here in the Valley.
Okay, and still owner with Mr. Than Dew.
So yes, the pharmacy record issued to MD24I Pharma is, as you've suggested, owned by Mr. and Mrs. Dew, a married couple, and Dr. Win in his individual capacity.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up for me. Board members,
to Ms. Galvin's point, I do want to note I have spoken with all of them to prepare for today's hearing. And I asked Ms. Dew alone to attend because she is, in addition to an owner of the pharmacy, a licensed pharmacist of her own right.
Understood. Thank you. That helps me. Board members? What is puzzling to me is why that we have two permits that are kept open, especially in light of the indictment for possibly billing and fraud, why we kept two permits open when we didn't have a physical operation. I would like to know a reason for that.
Dr. Leba, when you, I'm not certain when you say we, are you asking me to opine about that, or are you asking the licensing side of the board?
Well, I don't think they know. The MD I-24 Pharmacy kept open under the MD I-24 and SIPMD when there's actually no business going on. And that is concerning to me. Was the permits used for a way to bill claims, and that's what led to this indictment? Could you comment on that?
I can comment on that, and that is not at all what's contained in the indictment. It has nothing to do with the allegations in the complaint, which I should remind everyone are hotly contested and we refute, but the allegations in the complaint do not relate to pharmaceutical services in any way. They relate to incident 2 billing through the healthcare side of things. And on several of the counts, I am familiar with the indictment, several of the counts allege identity fraud in the sense that the allegation of the government is that a provider rendered services and Dr. Nguyen submitted those services of his own as though he had provided them when he in fact did not. Again, we dispute those allegations, but they are of record.
Were any of those services purportedly provided by any of the pharmacists that are in question here today?
No, the allegations, absolutely not, Ms. Walmsley. The indictment names only Lin Sao Nguyen, a licensed MD here in Arizona, and alleges that on various occasions he provided incident to billing improperly or charged for services that were not rendered. Than Du and Jenny Du do not appear at all in the indictment. And in fact, MD24 iPharma is not named in the indictment. There is nothing in there related to pharmaceutical services at all, nor to the provision of any, nor that implicate pharmacists in any.
Mr. Mooring, why keep the permits open if there's nothing going on?
Well, the information that we had about the permit, I certainly didn't know about it. And what basically happened that, again, I acknowledge was an error, Dr. Leyva, is that since nothing happened, we just sort of didn't pay attention to it. And as a result of the indictment, Ms. Richardson came out and on the day of her investigation, quite properly suspended the permit. It is my understanding that, I guess I don't know, can we close it right now? Because there is no business being done. There never has been any business being done. If we are permitted to close a suspended permit, we certainly will do so. We didn't think that we could do that. In other words, we didn't realize it was active and open, shall we say, until the investigation. And on the day of the inspection, it was moved to a suspended status. So we're not going through this process with the hope that the board will tell us we can open a business that never operated. We're going through this process so we can properly check all boxes, dot all I's, cross all T's, and close this out.
Mr. Mooring, are you aware that they have renewed their DME permit?
I came to that information from you as a result of your write-up of October's inspection.
Okay, and that DME permit is being utilized through the medical practice that has these indictments, correct?
I believe, well, the DME permit is issued to that medical practice, but my understanding is that it's not being used in the sense that my understanding is that because it's an active medical practice, it can dispense DME without a license. I don't have an answer as to why, after being told that several times, they renewed the DME permit.
Board staff, just to confirm, I just want to make sure we all get this straight. We have a DME permit that is open with no suspension on it. We have a limited pharmacy license that is in suspended status.
Correct.
Thank you.
Dr. Leyva, I have a question.
Yes.
Mr. Mooring, so you're acknowledging that there should have been a notification about closing since the pharmacy never opened. That never occurred.
That's correct. So from the board's perspective, on 12/27 of 19, the license was issued, and from all compliance standpoints, the pharmacy was open. Nothing ever happened. And at some point early on, probably in the early part of 2020, the licensee, and again, Ms. Du had already separated at that point, but the MD24 iPharma should have come back to the board and said, we made a mistake. We're not going to use this license. Please come do whatever closing inspection and close us out. That did not occur.
So Ms. Du wasn't affiliated with the pharmacy at that time, but her husband, Mr. Du, was one of the owners.
I want to parse that question a little bit, Ms. Walmsley, because the ownership group, the joint venture, was on the one hand, Than and Jenny Du, and on the other hand, Lin Nguyen, that would own the pharmacy. From the perspective of Mr. and Mrs. Du, when she severed as the PIC, that severed their ownership share. At that point, they had invested capital to get through the board process, through the investigation and the opening process. They made a decision, a business decision, that they would not recoup that, but didn't want to go further into debt. So from their perspective, they left. They did.
But that change of ownership was also never submitted to the board.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And had either that change of ownership been done, or in reality, had the joint venture, the three individuals come to the conclusion that it was not a viable project and closed it out, that would have been the correct course of action. That did not occur.
Mr. Mooring, did Mr. Fandu profit from any of the claims that led to the indictment of Lin Kao Win?
No, the claims in the indictment, and again, it's important to note that the indictment lists Dr. Win individually. He is charged in his individual capacity. They contend in the indictment that he issued bills, through this MD24 entity, but there's no contention that anybody, that either Thandu or Jenny Do profited. And in fact, the reality is that the Do family invested in this, as I said, business ventures fail. They invested in this thinking it would be a profitable venture. They decided in 2020 that the cost to do this was not worth the expected return. So they have all lost on this, and the counts in the indictment do not relate in any way to either Thandu or Jenny.
Thank you. Board members, it's my opinion in this case, and not knowing the outcome of the indictment, that there's just allegations at this point that there is a failure for a change of ownership and a failure for notification to the Board of Pharmacy on the closure of a pharmacy. And those are two items that we should act on today. With that, I will open it up to conversation or questions.
I don't want to get us down a rabbit hole, but I do have a question. What was the reason for not opening? Just curious.
Originally, it was felt that there would be a growth in the patient base of MD24, and that there would be sufficient patient need to fill prescriptions that we could do that for them profitably. As we got closer to it, it became apparent that many of the patients who had who would be getting medication through the providers at MD24 already had either existing services, or many of them were either homebound or nursing homebound. And just put it candidly, Ms. Snare, they weren't going to buy medication from us. They were going to get it from where they were getting it.
But I thought this was a limited service permit. Sorry to interrupt. And it wasn't a dispensing pharmacy. This was a pharmacy for MTM purposes. So that doesn't really match kind of what we approved.
It was to be a pharmacy for MTM purposes. We believe the patient census would support doing that profitably. We came to understand that the nature of the patient census would not support the overhead required to maintain the pharmacy license and have a pharmacist.
And that analytics information came up after getting a permit and deciding to go into business instead of before.
That's correct. During the time that we were going through the process and again, making those investments in both our time and the board's time and making the financial investments in this, it appeared to be a viable project. Once we were through everything and the permit was opened on 12/27 of 19, the dues decided that the overhead from their own side, that what it would cost them to continue to operate was too high. And MD24 iPharma realized that it would then need to go out and either find another joint venture pharmacist or hire a full-time person. And the economics of that just were not affected.
Madam Chair, may I? I'm sorry, Mr. Leyva, I'm not sure.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Morning. Did this pharmacy have any employees other than Ms. Jenny Do at any time? Pharmacist, technician?
No, sir.
And then I know you said this, I just want to clarify one last time. no bills for any services, drugs, MTMs, nothing on behalf of Dr. Nguyen. Nothing was ever billed out of MD 24.
To clarify a little bit more, Mr. Slight, nothing was ever billed out of the MD 24 iPharma. And I don't want to mislead you. MD 24 was a medical practice that billed patients, like would do a dermatology inspection and bill for that. So that did happen. I want to make sure our record is crystal clear. But from MD 24 iPharma, nothing. Never a bill run through there, never a request for, nothing happened. There wasn't any billable event.
So to reiterate, Mr. Leba, you said there was a failure to notify us of a change of ownership. What was
Yep.
the second thing that you had mentioned?
Failure to notify closure of a pharmacy. If there's
Okay,
not
so-
any other questions or concerns, I would make a motion for a $250 fine for failure to notify the closure of the pharmacy, $250 fine for failure to submit change of ownership, and allow them to close the suspended license upon payment of the fines due within 90 days. If not signed, move to hearing.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any other discussion before I call roll call? Dr. Gandhi?
Mr. Solari,
Aye.
Mr. Dang.
Is recused, sir.
Sorry, my apologies. Mr. Minkus,
Aye.
Mr. Leba,
Aye.
Ms. Lehan,
Aye.
Ms. Walmsley,
Aye.
Mr. Tom,
Aye.
Ms. Snare.
Aye.
Ayes have it with one recusal, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Will we receive instructions from staff or from the AG's office?
They'll work together and you'll see direction and the consent papers from the board.
Thank you very much
Board
for your
staff.
time today.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, everyone.
25L 21-0565, Fry's Pharmacy number 103, and Robert Ferguson. And Ms. Walmsley, I would ask you to take over.
Thank you, Dr. Leba. Can the individuals from Fry's please introduce themselves for the record, include your name and position?
Hi, we have Luis Lance, attorney with Corals and Brady. With me, I have Robert Ferguson, who's the pharmacist in charge.
That's me.
And we have Mark Soden, who is the regional pharmacy practice coordinator.
Thank you, Mr. Lance. And I believe Ms. Richardson was the compliance officer for this case as well. Ms. Richardson, can you give us a brief summary of the case, and then we'll allow Mr. Lance or someone from Fry's to make a statement after that.
Yes, ma'am. We received a complaint from a patient that a pharmacist who we later determined was Mr. Ferguson was using unsafe practices contrary to CDC guidelines when administering immunizations. Specifically, she stated that she received her COVID-19 booster vaccine, that the pharmacist had come into the waiting area of the pharmacy to administer vaccines to 4 patients. He had 4 syringes with him and the various paperwork, that he administered the vaccines to 3 of the patients without changing gloves in between or washing his hands. And then according to the complainant, the 3rd patient bled. The pharmacist wiped the blood with his gloved hand and then proceeded to administer the 4th vaccination to this complainant. She asked that he change his gloves at that point, and he directed her to go into the immunization administration room. When she entered the room, she said that all 4 of the syringes were lying together. He administered the vaccine to her, did not give her any instructions. She then told him that he needed to be sure to change gloves between patients, that he didn't respond to her, and then left the room and went back into the pharmacy. A confirmation of the vaccine to be administered and any counseling that would have been required did not occur. I did request a written response from Mr. Ferguson. As of the date of this report, a response was not received. I did request policies and procedures on their immunization practices from the pharmacy. Initially, I only received a bloodborne pathogen exposure control program and pharmacy disinfection policy. On April 1st, I ended up receiving the actual SOPs that involve the administration practice. And their policies do indicate that universal precautions should be followed. It does indicate that gloves, while not required by OSHA, it's a good practice for those to be changed between patients. It does require proper hand hygiene. So they do have policies in place that also include discussing the procedure with the patient, counseling them on any adverse effects and signs and symptoms of needing medical care. So those appear to be areas of their internal policies that were not followed in this case. And I will open it up to questions.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Board members, any questions for Ms. Richardson?
I just wanted to clarify, in your summary, you had listed that one of the procedures you requested the SOP was not provided on a timely basis, but now after you wrote this up, it's eventually been provided?
Yes, it was provided on April 1st, so about a week ago.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any additional questions, board members? Yes, Mr. Dang.
Mr. Dang, you're on mute.
Ms. Richardson, were you able to review the employees' training records? What I mean by that is all employees who are involved with the vaccination should have completed the bloodborne pathogen training issued by FRIES or any organization. So when you were there, do you recall reviewing those kind of documents?
Mr. Dang, the only thing that we require of pharmacists for training is their training that's required to get their certificate. And so that would be part of their APHA training that they do before they apply for immunization credentials with our board. And that would involve the universal precautions and all of that.
Thank you.
Board members, anything further?
Ms. Richardson, this is Ted Tong. Do you have any record of how many immunizations that this pharmacist has administered?
I do not have that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Lance, would you like to make a opening statement, or someone from FRIES?
Yes, thank you. First, we want to thank the board for the opportunity to discuss this matter. And at the outset, we would like to apologize to the board for Mr. Ferguson's not submitting a response. I know that's the case with me, is I'm not as technologically savvy as I'd like. He actually did intend to submit a response, and he drafted one, and he thought he had submitted it via email. When we discovered that there was no response submitted, we weren't able to locate that an email was ever sent. So we do apologize for that. We also appreciate Ms. Richardson's summary of the complaint. And I want to be clear that we're not saying that Ms. Richardson's summary of the complaint is inaccurate in any way. But Mr. Ferguson's recollection of the events are much different than what is depicted in the complaint. To provide a little bit of context, at the time of the event, a large number of people were getting their COVID-19 booster shots, and this was due to recommendations from the CDC. Oftentimes, many people wouldn't show up to their appointments on time. And as I'm sure you can appreciate, some patients would arrive early and others would arrive late. And given the appointment window, patients frequently arrive at the pharmacy around the same time. And that's what happened this day. So in order to efficiently provide care to patients, Mr. Ferguson prepared vaccinations for a number of individuals that had arrived at the pharmacy to get their vaccines. The prepared vaccinations were placed on a table in the vaccination room. Mr. Ferguson then went out to the waiting area to greet an elderly couple who were scheduled to receive their vaccinations before the others in the waiting area. He noticed that the elderly couple were not very mobile and that they had difficulty with ambulation. So in an effort to accommodate the elderly couple, Mr. Ferguson asked them whether they wanted to go back to the vaccination room or whether they wanted to receive their vaccines in the waiting area. So the elderly couple agreed to receive their vaccines in the waiting area, This isn't Mr. Ferguson's common practice, but he was just trying to accommodate the elderly couple. Mr. Ferguson administered the vaccinations to the elderly couple. Then he made his way back to the vaccination room. He was quickly approached by the patient who filed the complaint here. She began raising concerns that Mr. Ferguson had not changed his gloves. Mr. Ferguson assured the patient that he was on his way to the vaccination room to do just that. She then continued to follow him towards the vaccination room, and in an attempt to de-escalate the situation with the patient, Mr. Ferguson agreed to give her the next vaccine. The patient stood outside the vaccination room while Mr. Ferguson discarded the used syringes in the sharps bin, sanitized his hands, changed his gloves, and then he pulled the patient's vaccine from the pile of previously prepared syringes that were on the table. The syringes were separated by the individual patient's documentation. It's true that the syringes were on the table, but they were all unused. The only syringes that were on the table were the syringes that he had prepared for the upcoming appointments. There were no syringes on the table, and as previously mentioned, the used syringes were already in the sharps bin. The patient eventually entered the vaccination room and sat down. Mr. Ferguson confirmed the vaccine that the patient was scheduled to receive that day, and then asked if she had any questions. The patient did not have any questions about the vaccine itself, but she continued to raise concerns about him changing his gloves. He assured her that he had already changed his gloves. Mr. Ferguson then administered the vaccine. He immediately discarded the used syringe into the sharps container. He removed and disposed of his gloves, and then asked her again whether she had any questions. The patient again raised concerns about Mr. Ferguson changing his gloves, and he again assured her that he had changed his gloves. The patient asked to speak to the manager, so Mr. Ferguson gave her the name of the store manager, and then he left the room to tend to the other patients that were waiting to receive their vaccines. While we definitely understand the patient's concerns here, we can assure the board that there were no unsanitary or unsafe practices involved in either the preparation or administration of the patient's vaccine. And there have been no violations of law here. That said, Mr. Ferguson is committed to providing quality care, and he understands the importance of patients having confidence in the care that they receive. So as a result of this complaint, Mr. Ferguson has completed 3 CEs in immunization administration, and he has again reviewed the company's relevant policies and procedures. We again thank the board for an opportunity to discuss this matter, and we're happy to answer any questions or provide any information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lance. Board members, any questions for the individuals from Fry's?
Ms. Walmsley, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you did great detail in explaining that, and I appreciate that. Between the couple that you helped in the lobby, did you keep the same gloves on from like the wife to the husband? Maybe that's what the patient had seen.
Yes, I did keep the gloves on.
Okay. And at one point, did you have blood on your gloves or something?
No, I don't recall any blood on my hand. I know that I wiped with the alcohol swab before I gave the injection, the arm and stuff. So, I mean, I was wiping the arm, but I wasn't wiping blood.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Ms. Richardson, did we send Mr. Ferguson a reminder about his lack of response? So as I'm understanding Mr. Lance, he thought he sent a response. He never sent a response. And I think the reason why he's before us today is because we felt like there was a violation of policy and procedure. And quite frankly, we didn't have his side of the story. So just curious, did we send a follow-up request?
I'll take a look at my communications here. Looks like I initially contacted him for a response on November 10th, requesting he respond by November 24th. And then it looks like on November 12th, Mr. Soden, the regional manager, also asked him to prepare the written response and let him know if he had any questions. And that looks like the last of the communications I see.
Have we ever received a written response? I mean, now that he knows the email was prepared and it wasn't sent, the email should be in his file somewhere. Has he ever submitted that to us?
No, sir.
And to be clear, Mr. Solari, he wasn't able to even find a draft of the email. We didn't become aware that a response was missing until we requested the board file in preparation for this conference.
Which was how long ago?
I'm not sure when the notice of conference was received, but our law firm became involved maybe 3 weeks ago.
So even in the 3 weeks, you haven't been able to provide that written response to us. How soon can you get that written response to complete the file?
We can get you a written response by next Friday.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferguson, I appreciate the detail that Mr. Lance provided, but I'd like to hear a little bit from you. I understand that this is a little bit of a he said, she said situation here, but as a licensee of our board, I would think that you would be very concerned about providing a timely response. Why didn't you follow up to make sure that that was received?
And I apologize if I'd known that I hadn't responded, I would have definitely taken the steps to respond. And I'm sorry that didn't happen. But I had thought I'd responded.
Thank you. Board members, any additional questions? Or discussion?
Is there any video of this or any that kind of evidence that we could go back and look at?
So I did look at that because I figured that that would be helpful, especially for, just for coaching purposes. And it's all been erased from that time. We don't keep them long-term like that. So we did not have any.
Thank you.
I personally this is where I'm at right now. I don't feel like we necessarily have any violations here other than violations potentially of company policy. But at this point in time, it's really a he said, she said situation. It's unfortunate that they're all here before us today, because I think had we received the response in writing that Mr. Lance provided, it probably would have been dismissed at complaint review, but that's not what happened. So I'm kind of the opinion that I don't think that there's any violations. I think that he's certainly learned his lesson and learned that he needs to be communicative with our board if there are concerns that arise. Ultimately, we want to hear your side of the story, because sometimes what the complaints that come before us are not always 100% factual, and your perspective is important to us. So I'm kind of the opinion that we dismiss it today. I think he's learned a lesson. I don't know that anything further needs to happen, but I'm certainly willing to entertain additional discussion or thoughts.
Madam Chair, since he's already done, and I'm happy to see this, that he's already done 3 hours of CE on his own, could we do 3 hours of non-disciplinary CE, accepting the CE he's already done and have him submitted to the board? Instead of dismissing it.
I don't see a harm in it personally, as long as it's non-disciplinary. Typically we don't give CE for non-violations.
That's what I was going to say.
It's kind of where
no
my head
violation.
is. I'm glad to see that he took it seriously, and I'm glad to see that he brushed up on it, because I do think that there perhaps were some opportunities there. But I also understand how busy the pharmacies were, especially in the height of the COVID vaccination. And I certainly appreciate his efforts to vaccinate the public. So I don't know, I could go either way.
Yeah, and I'm okay with just dismissing it. I just wanted to give him credit and acknowledge that he's done the CE and he's reviewed the policy. So that was my way of acknowledging that.
Right. I don't think that we should put it on there just because there's no violation. We'll just verbally acknowledge it in the meeting right now that we appreciate the CE.
And I always like to see that there's been action taken as things come before us before we impose those actions. So I think that was certainly a good resolution.
I make a motion to dismiss.
Do I have a
I'll
second?
second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Lance, Mr. Soden, and I'm losing your name, Mr. Ferguson. I apologize. Appreciate your time. Thanks for being here with us today.
President Walmsley, I have one follow-up on
Yes.
submitting a written response. Is that something that we still need to do, or where do we land there?
Board staff, I would defer to your direction.
Madam Chair, at this point, I don't feel it's necessary.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Mr. Lance, no, a written response is not required at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Bye.
Thank you, Ms. Walmsley. Moving on to tab 29, special request, discussion, consideration, and possible action. 29B, discussion and consideration for permit BioCare Inc., doing business as BioCare SD.
Hi, this is Kathleen Hopping, and I'm representing BioCare. I do have a short presentation that I would like to share, if I may share my screen.
You can. I am limiting that to 5 minutes, but if you want to share a 5-minute presentation with the board to make a decision, I'll allow that.
I will have to skip some slides. It's probably closer to 10 minutes, but I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Crystal, can you make Ms. Hopping a co-host so she can share her screen? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'm Kathleen Hopping. I am the VP of Regulatory Affairs for BioCare, and BioCare is an in-state resident wholesale distributor, and we are requesting a deviation from a current Arizona administrative code. And the specific regulation is that product be removed to quarantine and not sold or otherwise distributed when it has less than 120 days remaining on the expiration date. The products that BioCare distributes are high-dollar products that are often in short supply and require special storage and handling, including temperature control. Because of this, BioCare's specialty distribution model does vary greatly from the traditional wholesale distribution model. And I'm going to try to run through a couple of these pretty quickly. BioCare was founded by Vitalant, and Vitalant is the second largest blood supplier in the US, who started consignment programs for blood and blood products in the early 1940s. And later on in the 1980s, BioCare was created to help hospitals secure timely products for bleed management and patient care. BioCare did have a change of ownership in late 2021, and it's that change in ownership that really prompted me to come before the board today. BioCare had submitted the same deviation request with the board and was approved back in August of 2017. But for more than 40 years, BioCare's foundation and core business has been specialty distribution. And this slide just shows our mission statement here. And part of the reason we're able to do this is BioCare does have a wide-reaching distribution capability. Originally, the distribution centers that we used were blood centers owned by Vitalant, where staff are on site 24/7, 365 days a year, and they are trained in inventory management of regulated products. And here we're talking about products with 2 years, 3 years expiration date. And in the blood center world, for example, a unit of packed red cells has a 42-day expiration date. So to this day, BioCare still distributes through a network of blood centers where stat and emergency deliveries are part of the core competencies. So what's unique about BioCare is their consignment model. BioCure was the first distributor to offer consignment in 1998 and built its business on factor consignment to hospitals affiliated with hemophilia treatment centers. These programs were started specifically for hemophilia patients in the beginning to address their unique needs. We continue to offer true consignment and only bill for product when it is used, not when the product is delivered, which is a key component of our request for this deviation. And this is just a slide showing some of the products that we use. Again, they're not routine product, they are specialty products. So the consignment model from the hospital perspective, many of the products that BioCure handles are used in emergency situations when patients have critical need for life-saving therapies. As stated, BioCare's specialty distribution model does vary from traditional models, where a hospital or special facility will order and purchase cases of the product. The product is paid for and it's shipped and then placed into inventory of the purchaser, where it may remain on the shelves for months. However, many hospitals are reluctant to stock many of the specialty products, again, such as these hemophilia drugs, due to the high cost, expiration risk, and episodic nature of the therapies. Some of these products can cost up to $22,000 per vial, and a course of therapy can often run into the millions of dollars. In addition, the dosing or course of therapy can vary wildly and can stop and start several different times. To counter this, BioCure offers consignment programs to assist hospitals in ensuring that products are always available to their patients, as a result, increasing and enhancing patient care. So how BioCare is able to support the hospitals and the patients that they serve. We do manage over 250 consignment accounts, and we're viewed as an experienced and effective consignment distributor. We do have experienced field representatives that offer 24/7 care. They're able to actually physically go into the hospitals and provide product reconciliation. And they also are there to confirm night and weekend deliveries as needed. Our representatives will personally pick up, pack, and return any excess or short-dated products. And there's no other distributor in the industry that does this today. So with this program, the hospitals really have zero expiration risk and no inventory carrying costs. And also part of the reason why we're able to do this is just because of the technological advances. And we are able to do detailed tracking and tracing through both our ERP and then also TraceLink. So the specific request, we are requesting a deviation again from the section that's referenced here on the slide from Arizona Administrative Code. Again, specifically, it is the requirement for product to be removed to quarantine and not sold or otherwise distributed when it has less than 120 days remaining on the expiration date. This rule first appeared in the early 1970s and has been amended a little bit along the way. But based on my search, I can't find where this particular section, this K1II, has been amended. So it's likely based on technology and developments from greater than 20 years ago. The biological products that BioCure handles today were likely not even a thought in the 70s or subsequently was the cold chain process and technology that does allow us to proceed with just-in-time ordering and delivery. We do not believe that it was ever the intent to limit the distribution of such products and to require destruction at the 120-day mark. The rule was likely designed to protect hospitals from getting short-dated products. However, the BioCare distribution model was designed to protect the hospital, the specialty product, and then also the patient by ensuring product availability. I'm going to just, again, kind of quickly go through this, how we're able to identify what is housed at these consignment hospitals. We do base it on historical usage at those hospitals. We are able to provide a stock to cover a 24-hour period for known therapies and protocols. An additional product is delivered to the hospital based on need. We do work closely with the hospital when we're delivering products, I'm sorry, again, to patients that have been identified with this need. We do communicate to the hospitals that they will be provided with short-dated products, which is usually not a problem for the hospitals because they are used either for emergency surgery or in the emergency room. Because of this, the dosing is immediate and there really is little risk of expiration or no risk of expiration. BioCare does keep in contact throughout the bleed with the hospital to make sure, again, that they have product available, and then any product that would be left over at the conclusion of the therapy is picked up. And really, this ability to move short-dated product effectively is central to the services that BioCare provides. And it does enhance patient care by ensuring access to product quickly. And in the end, we believe it does lower hospital and payer cost.
Thank you for that. Just real quick for board members before we enter discussion, please state succinctly and simply for us again the nature of your request for deviation today.
Yes, we are requesting to have a deviation from the Arizona Administrative Code that would require us to pull back product or not ship product that has less than or equal to 120 days left on the expiration date.
And by pulling back, would it be repurposed and reused for another patient? Is that what the request is?
The request is the ability to move around product that is within that 120-day period of the expiration date so that we're able to move the product around using our distribution network. We are able to find hospitals with a need where we're able to use those products.
Okay, and from my knowledge, this has nothing to do with breaking up a package to an each size, if that's what this is not about.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
So this does not have anything to do with breaking up a package size into individual size each?
No, it does.
Okay, thank you.
It does not.
Okay, that was for my clarification. Board staff, it was mentioned that there was a deviation over 3 years ago. Typically deviations are for 2 years. Did we get some kind of continuance on this, or is the deviation longer than what we standard do?
Mr. Chair, I'm trying to think back 3 years ago. I know we had a short-dated product allowed to be redistributed during the COVID time period. But since the emergency is lifted, that waiver is no longer in place. I know it's up for discussion as well during a rule writing session. But I'm trying to think back 3 years ago regarding BioCare and short-dated product.
And that waiver is not included in the reading either to kind of reference.
It can't, yeah, BioCare was approved with a deviation for short-dated product due to the nature of the product. I don't remember the exact year. I don't have a copy of that deviation. I don't know that it may have even predated the software that we're currently using. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know the board meeting where BioCare came before the board was in August of 2017. And I'm trying to think if I have any other specifics. I know that I do have a copy of the video from that meeting. And I do have, if I can find it, the timestamp of where BioCare was before the board, if that would be helpful.
It's okay with me. I just wanted to confirm that it was out there and approved once before. Board members, open for any questions or discussion?
Mr. President, my hospital does use this system. These are hard to get products, especially in this day and age. And I think BioCare does do a good job of moving product around to meet patient needs. They're expensive, they're hard to get. It'd be a shame to waste them and quarantine them with a 90-day expiration date. I'm in favor of continuing this deviation. I do think they serve our patients well.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Solari.
I agree with Mr. Solari.
Okay, I am in support as well. I'll entertain a motion unless there's any other questions.
Mr. President, I'm willing to make a motion to grant this deviation, continue this deviation, for the standard 2 years or whatever the statutes require.
I have a motion and I have a second by Dr. Dang. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Ms. Hopking, for your time today.
Yes, and thank you for letting me present today. I do appreciate your time.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving along to 29C. We've done that. 29D is La Frontera Center, Inc., doing business as psychiatric health facility. A deviation request. Do I have any representatives here today?
You do, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I'm here. Rena Quijada, I'm the director, and Colleen is also on the call.
Okay, thank you. And would you care to tell us a little bit about your request for deviation in front of us today?
Yes, we are requesting a deviation on Administrative Code R423653. We are a 16-bed, maximum 16-bed standalone level 1 psychiatric facility. And we are requesting pharmacy hours to be 20 to 30 instead of a full-time pharmacist.
Okay.
Ms. Quijada, what is your position at this center?
I'm the director, so I work for La Frontera, and I'm the director for crisis services, and I work out of the level 1. And the reason we are asking for the deviation is because we have a max of 16, like Colleen said, and we do not take medically compromised patients. So there is not a large scale of medications needed at the facility.
Board staff or maybe Ms. Sutcliffe could comment on the legality of the request in front of us if we're able to do that. And also, I believe there's a 72-hour rule that a establishment cannot go without a pharmacist for more than 72 hours. If somebody could, on Ms. Sutcliffe, maybe you could comment on that as well, if you're available.
That is correct. There is in rule, there is a language that would allow the board to grant them not a deviation, but to allow them to work for less than 40 hours in a pharmacy. But there's also a section in there, 654, that requires them that they can't go without a pharmacist in the hospital for more than 72 consecutive hours. So both of those would need to be looked together. For the hours that they aren't open, they are required to have an on-call pharmacist. The on-call pharmacy provision could be accomplished through shared services, however, whether that's intra-company or with a contracted other permitted pharmacy.
Thank you, Ms. Sutcliffe. For the representatives, I just want to confirm there would be no emergency medicine crash carts available. And if there was an emergency, 911 would be the option that would be used.
Correct.
Good. Board members, my opinion is that it is reasonable for a 16-bed and for access to the psychiatric health unit and mental health care, but to couple it with the requirement that the hospital does not go without a pharmacist for more than 72 hours. And I'll open it up. That's my opinion. I'll open it up to the board for discussion.
Mr. President, can I just clarify that this facility does have an inpatient pharmacy on location, and the services for pharmacy are not being provided by an offsite entity?
We currently do not have we are actually trying to get licensed for JACO. And so we are in the process of building the pharmacy. We don't currently have an in-house pharmacy.
What pharmacy do you contract with? I don't recall in here.
We,
Genoa.
Genoa Pharmacy.
Okay, thank you. So,
we have been approved to, so we were waiting for this request to then build out the pharmacy.
Ms. Sutcliffe, does that change anything with the kind of the lines that I brought up for possible option?
Do they have a hospital license with DHS?
So the first step is becoming the hospital, and then it's JACO. So that's the way it usually works, I believe.
They do have a specialty inpatient behavioral health facility, DHS subacute license.
Then at present, it would be basically community pharmacy, outpatient dispensing to that facility. You don't have a hospital license or a hospital permit with our board.
Right, so we need to build the pharmacy, which we had gotten the deviation approved for the smaller square footage due to some of the information provided here, again, 16-bed max unit. And so with that, we were trying to see about the pharmacist and what needs to happen there. And then if both were met, then we start building the pharmacy and then we go for the hospital license.
I think
We didn't want to put all of this into place and build a pharmacy and then get to, not have everything fall in line, so to speak.
I'm a little bit confused. Please help me with this. If you don't have a pharmacy, if you don't have a hospital license and you don't have a pharmacy license, how are you housing patients, and why is Genoa Pharmacy providing drugs to unlicensed facility? I'm lost here.
We're licensed as Mr. Leong said, we are behavioral health. Inpatient facility.
I know
But
historically.
you're licensed as a behavioral health facility, but not as a hospital. You're trying to convert your behavioral health facility into a hospital and get licensed accordingly. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Leong, did you have a comment?
My comment was going to be, thank you, Board President, that historically, I believe Genoa has been contracted for a meds to beds delivery process for outpatient needs. But of course, I defer to the applicant for further details.
Yes, they have. Genoa works with La Frontera, and they supply our medications for us right now because we are a subacute. And they can under the because they are a retail pharmacy. And then once we become a hospital, they cannot do that. And that is why we're building the hospital.
Board staff, do we have a permit?
Yeah, yes, we do. Yes, we do. This is Jennifer. So
Okay.
La Frontera at 1601 East Apache Park Place is approved, but it's awaiting inspection.
Okay. So we can grant a deviation based off that. Board members, any other?
I was just going to say that this application was previously approved with another deviation request.
Yeah, the size.
That's correct.
Board members, any other question?
Mr. Chair, this is Kevin. So the question I have for Colleen Vineyard is, does the hospital right now have a remote pharmacy services contract in place?
No, we do not.
So if you do not, then how are you guys handling new admits, medication reconciliation presently?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. We currently have Genoa
Shared service.
is a shared service. So when the client comes into the facility, we get the meds, we call Genoa, they fill the meds, we go pick them up.
Okay. What type of EHR do you currently use right now at the facility?
I'm not sure what an EHR is.
EHR, that's employee health records, just a system for medication profile for the patients.
We use Order Connect.
Okay. And then what's the average daily census at this hospital?
Average daily census is about 8 right now,
So consistently every day, there's about 8 patients.
between 8 and 5. 8 on the low end, or I'm sorry, 5 on the low end, 8. It all depends on admissions. Some days it'll be 5, some days it'll be 8.
Are there any IV medications administration involved?
We don't do any IV medications. We don't do any emergency medications. I'm trying to think what other, off the top of my head, what other medications that would be. We basically, all we do is oral medications.
And are most of these medications stocked in Omnicell or Pyxis stations?
Not currently right now. They're currently stored in a med cabinet because when we call Genoa, they fill them for us in vials and then the nurses dispense them.
With the hospital, once it's completed, do you intend to have an automated dispensing system like?
Yes,
Pyxis or-
we are going to have a Pyxis once we get the hospital license, we will have a Pyxis system.
So this deviation request will end when you are able to obtain the hospital license, correct?
The 20 hours?
Yep.
No, we want to continue the 20 hours because we only have 16 clients. We can only max have 16 clients.
I understand, but once your facility is licensed by DHS as a general hospital, are you intending to have 20 hours of pharmacist service at this site?
Yes, because we're not going to be a general hospital. We're going to be a behavioral health hospital. We're going to be just a level 1 hospital. So we will only do psychiatric medications. And if a member comes in on blood pressure medications, we don't take any medically compromised patients.
You're saying your clients are only healthy adults with no comorbidities other than psychiatric?
No, I'm not saying healthy. I'm saying acute medically compromised. If they've been on blood pressure medications and they're stable, or if they're diabetic and they're stable on their diabetic medications, then we accept the clients.
And once you open as a hospital, your pharmacy will stock the insulins and the.
Yes, they'll stock the normal, the everyday medications like that, but we will not do the specialty medications.
Thank you.
Board members, I'm willing to make a motion to grant the deviation if they have a max census of 16 beds. If they go above 16 beds, they come before us again, that the pharmacist will, absence will not go longer than 72 hours. And they continue to keep the shared service agreement with Genoa during that time. And that would be my motion.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Have one opposed, Dr. Dang?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
29E, this is for Rebecca Ann Gray.
I'm recused.
Hello.
Hi there, would you please state your name for the record?
Yeah, my name is Rebecca Gray.
Okay, welcome to the meeting, and would you make a statement on what you would like us to consider today?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My purpose for coming in front of the board is to hopefully get the disciplinary action portion removed from my from when I was audited for my CE, based on my circumstance, I guess. I just kind of wanted to come in front of you guys and explain to you my version of what happened, and like kind of show you that there was no ill intent here. There was just a mix up, and hoping to not have the disciplinary portion and just have non-disciplinary.
Okay, you can proceed.
So I was first audited for my CE on January 17th of this year. I emailed back on January 21st and reported my CE that I had completed. I was under full knowledge that I had completed my 30 hours of CE. My issue that I ran into in reporting them initially to the audit was I was trying to toggle between two platforms that I used for my CE. I'll give you a little background. I switched companies in May of last year. I was at my previous employer for almost 10 years. So we always used the same platform for my pharmacist letter. And I had transferred over to a new pharmacy, to Cigna Pharmacy, and was still using my old login, was still active for a period of time after. So my first CE day that I had with my new company, I was able to do more CE in that platform. And then my second time that I went in there, I was able to pull up the platform, and see like my previous CE that I had completed. However, it was not allowing me to do any new CE. So at that point, I created my new account with Pharmacist Letter through Cigna because they allow us an account through the company. And I started completing the rest of my CE through their login platform. So when coming to the time to renew, I was toggling back and forth between the two platforms. And I know that I saw that I had completed 16 hours in the old platform. I looked at it, I want to at least 3 times because I was like really worried about not completing the right amount. And so I had it that I was to do 14 CE, my new platform. Also coming to Cigna, they want us to be more active in precepting. So that first time that I went in and did my CE through Walmart's old platform, I saw that there was preceptor like courses on there, and decided to try and be proactive and do the preceptor courses to prepare myself for when I would be accepting students. And in looking back at like my all of my courses, those were not CE eligible. They were with Walmart's platform. They have their bloodborne pathogen, let's say, courses and other Walmart specific courses in there, and they're kind of teased apart. And then there is also the CE too. So my understanding is that it was counting that as a course, but not necessarily a CE course. As soon as I found out that I had not have the 2 CEs that I thought were in there, I have the emails back and forth with Ms. Thayer that I was like, felt horrible and wanted to correct it as soon as possible. And emailed her 2 CEs like the next morning. I did 2 CEs that night as soon as I found out that, I didn't have 30, and emailed them to her the next morning just because I felt awful. But
Appreciate that comment.
Yeah.
Ms. Gray. Yes, board members, I think no matter how we look at this, we're 2 hours short in CE. And I do understand the intentions were to have the CE done, but they weren't done. I'll open it up for conversation or questions for Ms. Gray.
Mr. President, I see in the packet that the NABP CPE monitor statements are also there. And so I wanted to ask Ms. Gray, these are ACPE approved CEs that you have done. Why didn't you just use the CPE monitor to monitor your total numbers?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I wish that I had recalled that, but honestly, my initial emails to show my CEs, I was downloading each completed CE from the old platform and then trying to upload each individual one. And some of them weren't working. And I discussed this with my staff pharmacist, that I was getting caught up on this. And she was like, well, why don't you log into the NABP monitor site? And I honestly didn't even think of it prior. Obviously, I wish I would have. And I will do that going forward now that I have logged into it, know how to log in, know that it keeps the record of all of those. But I honestly didn't even think about that until she brought it up.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Board members, any other questions?
Question for board staff. We do have the ability now to give non-disciplinary CE. That was the whole purpose of us pushing that through the rules package. Is that correct?
It is correct. It's not effective until next month sometime.
I see. So she doesn't meet the deadline for that. Because I'm reading her consent agreement, and in the consent agreement, the fee is there, the additional CE for the next review period is there, but the consent agreement wasn't clear whether there is discipline or non-disciplinary, and I don't know if that's assumed that it's disciplinary until we have the ability to not do that.
Yeah, on the front page, it should indicate one way or the other, but we don't have the ability for non-disciplinary at this time. It's still a good month out.
Thank you.
Board members, any other questions?
I'm willing to share thoughts if
Absolutely.
we just don't have the ability to do what she asks yet. If this had happened in a different year, we would be able to do this. But at this point, I don't think we have the ability to do this. We want to do this, but per statute, we can't yet. So at this point, I'm unfortunately going to recommend dismissing this special request or denying this special request.
Thank you, Mr. Solari. Do I have a second?
Can we move this to the next board meeting and then be able to do it?
I don't think so, since the conduct occurred before the other option was available.
And the other consensus in this board meeting would be the same. I have a motion by Mr. Solari and looking for a second. Dr. Dang with a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ms. Gray, we do hear you and thank you for your statement today. Your special request has been denied. I do thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Gandhi and Jennifer, can you direct me on anything that is still left with the agenda?
Agenda item 31, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Agenda item 31, discussion of items to be placed on a future meeting agenda. Open it up to board members, board staff.
May I, Mr. President?
Absolutely.
So we've had several cases before us, this board meeting, last board meeting, where it was difficult to determine exactly who's responsible for violations that occur in pharmacies. And I wanted to ask help in this. In circumstances where a violation has occurred and the individual or individuals responsible for the violation can't be determined or are not individuals that are licensed by this board, I want the board to be able to hold the permit holder accountable and be able to discipline the permit holder. How can we make that happen?
So I think what we're looking for today, and Ms. Galvin, Mr. Hartgrave can guide me, is a discussion on possible future, but not solving the item. So we can place a agenda item for next to have this discussion. But right now we're looking for, because it's not noticed, Mr. Solari, the ideas for the next meeting.
Yeah, that was really my intention. I'd like to
Okay.
be able to discuss this issue. If board staff can help me with this, come up with some, recommendations on how to hold a permit holder responsible when we can't find the individual that has caused the problem.
Okay, thank you.
We made a note, Mr. Solari.
Thank you, kindly.
Dr. Leba,
Yes.
prior to the next legislative session, I think perhaps we need to have some more discussion around whether we need to revisit the statute that was discussed in Mr. Morris's presentation regarding prescriber involvement in the pharmacy and things like that. I do think that perhaps that's a little bit outdated. I don't know if that is the appropriate purview of our board or if that's something that the association needs to potentially take up. But I do think that he brought up some interesting points around the conflicts as the role and the role in the scope of pharmacists has expanded. So I do think that there perhaps needs to be some clarity put into the statutory language to make sure that we are really clear on how that process should work with what pharmacists are prescribing as well.
Thank you. Any other topics, board members?
I think 2 is a limit, Mr. Chair.
Just an artificial new rule that you're imposing, Cam.
Yes, it is.
We can
will
discuss
move.
that in the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, board members. I appreciate that. Last, we will go to call to the public.
There is about a 20-second delay.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. I'll defer to Dr. Gandhi and Jennifer on appropriate time to adjourn.
Give me another, it just showed up on YouTube. I was tracking the delay
Okay.
between what we see versus YouTube, and it just popped up on the YouTube screen. So we'll probably
Okay, thank
give it
you.
another time.
Thank you.
So Chair, I don't see anybody in the waiting area or anybody dialed in to speak. I think
Okay.
that should have been appropriate enough time.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, board members, board staff, and citizens of Arizona, thank you for a very good meeting and look forward to see you on the next board meeting, and this meeting is adjourned.